Good afternoon, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Just 1 or 2 minutes, people are joining, just to give them a chance to join, and we will start.
Sure, sir.
I start. I think it's, yeah.
Yes, sir, I think we can start. Participants are joining.
Yes. Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to this PhD webinar on search and seizure under the Income Tax Act. This webinar is part of PhD knowledge sharing activity. We have senior expert speakers from lead firms who will be sharing their knowledge on this important subject. The discussion includes the principal provisions of law involved, rights and obligations of the tax department and the assessees, legal issues, and views on the same. The processes and aspects involved, along with related compliances, in a practical manner, and based on experience, are also being discussed. The expert speakers will endeavor to share their knowledge on the complex subject in a simple, clear manner. Complexity of the tax matters is seen from the observations of a genius like Albert Einstein, who said he found income tax provisions to be complex. The topics being covered today are search.
I need Abhi Rohit sir na High Court mein, so I just need someone to look.
Rights and obligations, including the taxpayer's charter, ground rules, and requisition under Section 132A. This will be discussed by Rohit Jain. Post-search investigation, appraisal report, giving of statements and retractions, and the legality related thereto during search and post-search proceedings will be discussed by Harpreet Ajmani. Penalty and prosecution related to search matters are being discussed by Mr. Tejveer Singh. Search assessments and reassessments, both under the previous regime of Section 153A, etc., and presently under Section 148, etc., will be discussed by Mr. Ajay Vadwa. The CBDT circular pursuant to decision in Abhisar Buildwell, which said the matter could be taken up in reassessment proceedings, subject to law prevailing, will also be discussed by Ajay Vadwa. We then have an interesting part at the end where certain important related laws, such as Black Money Act, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, Benami Property Act, and interplay between Tax Act and these acts will be discussed by Gaurav Jain, giving a brief capsule or essence of these provisions. By their nature, search and seizure proceedings may not be a pleasant experience, but they are essential. They are essential to ensure that citizens walk the straight and narrow path and that they comply with their tax obligations rather than having undisclosed income and assets freely without check, which is not permissible. These proceedings are also more relevant, in a manner of speaking, when they may relate to criminal matters and criminals engaged in uncivil activities, which clearly deserve to be stopped and frowned upon. While assessees must know their rights and can request for them, they must also comply with their obligations, which include cooperating with the tax department in such proceedings. There is a citizen charter for assessees, including for search matters. This will be touched upon by Mr. Rohit Jain. The provisions of the Act also have built-in safeguards so that the law of the land tries to make it fair and just with due process and to try to avoid hardship. And this aspect is certainly welcome. CBDT, we appreciate, has also been giving guidelines and making observations for prevention of hardship. CBDT has said that such proceedings should be based on credible evidence and that any endeavor by officers for coercion and undue influence to get confession, to get undisclosed income by confession, in the absence of credible evidence, will only lead to subsequent retraction, and as such, that should not be done. This is in Central Board of Direct Taxes instructions of 2003 and 2014. In fact, they have gone so far as to say that any such endeavor by the officers shows other officers also in poor light, and that it will be viewed very seriously and adversely by the Board of Taxes. The best way for citizens to avoid the difficulties of search and discovery of undisclosed income and assets is compliance with tax laws and keeping of proper accounts and records which are up to date and which bear evidence to the income and assets of an assessee. On the side of the assessee, his asks include fair and reasonable process, and amongst others, some aspects that need to be well complied with by the tax department that assessees may request for are as under. Searches should be based upon duly processed, credible information, and they should not be for fishing and roving investigation that may be based only upon suspicion. Seizures should be done only when they relate to undisclosed income and undisclosed assets, and that too after due opportunity to the assessee to explain the same. If evidence of explanation of source cannot be adequately given in the short time and circumstances of the search, then when given subsequent to search, it should be duly considered and assets that may have been seized released in a short period. Regular books of account, regular bank accounts, assets disclosed on record should not lead to seizure or restraint order as may be. There is a very substantial amount of tax information and other information with the department today. They should be duly processed from both aspects. If there is avoidance, evasion, then certainly action is called for. At the same time, if something is explained based on regular transactions borne out by such network and information and data with the government, then assessees should be given due credit for the same without considering related income or assets to be undisclosed. Once a search is on, and there are unfortunately some undisclosed income, if any, then assessees should seriously consider that to avoid further loss or litigation or to cover loss of resources and time, assessees can consider settling even if it is to buy peace. Rather, they would be well advised to seriously consider the same. If you have erred, even if inadvertently, it is better to buy peace. It is better to come clean. There are possibilities of doing so through lesser penal provisions if you come clean at the right time during the search. There used to be settlement commission, which is now no longer there. However, there is a need to have a forum or a methodology that would give assessees a chance to go for due settlement. And such settlement is in the interest of both parties. Nobody wants long, drawn-out litigation. It is costly for both. It consumes resources for both. So, what is the appropriate forum and methodology that can be adopted? I repeat, even if it's just to buy peace, that an assessee can settle and come clean. In search assessments and appraisal reports pursuant to the search, there should be no fixed view. There should be no need to justify the issues for which the search was made. If the department's concerns and queries are explained, then it is not necessary that the appraisal report should continue to count that as undisclosed income. It is similarly not necessary that once some amounts are there in the appraisal report, that the assessing officer should say, this is there in the appraisal report, you say what you will, I will take it as income, in case he believes he should do so. these being harsh proceedings, being extraordinary proceedings, being an exception rather than a rule, it is even more important that it is only what is just and fair and merited and warranted by the facts and circumstances and law of the case, that only that is finally added as undisclosed income or undisclosed assets to be followed by consequences thereof. Good evidence does not cease to be good just because it emanates pursuant to a search. There are also certain well-known concepts, and these concepts of tax assessments and computations of income need to be kindly kept in view. Even if there be, if any, some undisclosed income, then there should be avoidance of double tax. And these are settled principles, but they need to be unfailingly followed and adopted without concern and with the courage of conviction by the person passing the order that he is doing what is just and fair. Avoidance of double taxation, such as on the one hand, we say somebody had undisclosed income, and then if he purchased something with that, it cannot again be taxed second time or doubly, that now you have an undisclosed asset also. So it can be taken once. There is telescoping, there is a lump sum amount and various smaller amounts, and the lump sum amount is disclosed or settled, then the smaller amounts knock off against the larger amount. We call it telescoping. There is a running account, something coming, something going, there is a churn. And then these are accepted principles, subject to facts, that it is only the peak balance that should be taken. After all, it is that peak balance that has circulated, and in all fairness, it is that which should be assessed. And if we do not do so, then these additions will only take up everybody's time, including the department and the SESI and the appellate authorities or other courts. Because such additions without fair computation principles are not going to stand the test of appeal or the test in higher courts. From time to time, changes have come. Some of the changes have been necessitated by perhaps the law not achieving its objective. To that extent, it is an acceptable and understandable and a called for evolution. It is a dynamic life and work, and it is the same with tax laws. So we had provisions for search assessments, which were special provisions, and then from 1/4/21, these have changed. But on the earlier provisions, we've had the Supreme Court say something, and they have said something about finding of incriminating material in the course of the search, in absence of which the additions may not be possible, subject again to the case. But then, under the law, once this aspect is gone, now there are other provisions, and this whole matter continues to be live, whether on other provisions of the Act, certain additions related to search cases, even without incriminating material being found in the earlier methodology for search assessments. Can they again be assessed? CBDT in August last month has again taken out a circular, and there is serious concern with people that this is going to lead to fairly extensive litigation once again. It will not decisively settle the liability. It will not reduce litigation. And reduction of litigation is the stated policy and objective of our government. And it is good policy. Continuing and ending on the ask that I had spoken about. If a search is made and as time was not there or evidence or material was not there, a seizure is done, but subsequently such explanation and evidence is available, then we do have section 132 capital B for explaining and releasing such seized assets. But that is subject to payment of certain tax liabilities. Was that really the intent of search and seizure under this chapter? That certain other tax liabilities may also be considered for such seized assets that were disclosed and did not deserve to be seized. These are such points that need to be considered by the government. They have done many changes, and we do urge that in all fairness, they consider this and certain other aspects. If something is seized without merit, then let us swiftly give it back to the person to whom it belongs. And if there is some other tax payable, then let that tax be collected in the normal course. There are other procedures and provisions of the Act to protect the interest of the government and to collect due taxes, which certainly the government is entitled to do and must do. On the changes that came over time, including opportunity, Charter of Rights, others. One important one is that now, under the Act, you cannot seize stock in trade, even if there is a concern that it may relate to undisclosed income. Explanation will come, demand will be collected if justified, but you cannot seize. Similarly, one should not stop the business of an assessee. Let us say there is a factory. There may be for 1 day, for half a day, for 2 days, some temporary factors which will go in. But to the extent reasonably and fairly possible, let the business go on, let production go on, let sales go on. It will only lead to tax and indirect tax, and it is part of the employment and salary which is paid to the persons working there. It's in the best interest of all stakeholders, including the government. So try to reduce the effects of the search where so justified, such as letting a business carry on, particularly one that is on record for many years and has been complying within reason or more with its obligations. And if it has erred, then certainly that entity would in any case need to comply with whatever falls on him for that non-compliance. With these words, I thank you very much for joining us today. I wish you an interesting and rewarding afternoon. I now request the first speaker, is Rohit there? Mr. Rohit Jain, to make his presentation on search proceedings, etc. Rohit is a CA and an advocate by profession. He is a senior member of the Vash Associates Tax Group and has been associated with the firm for more than 2 decades. He has done litigation and advisory for tax and allied laws and has handled various complex matters, both in representation as well as on advice, including domestic, international reconstructions. He regularly appears before the courts and tribunals and appellate and quasi-judicial authorities. Rohit is a highly respected tax expert, and I request you to kindly welcome him. Mr. Rohit Jain, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, Rohit sir is held up in a matter before High Court. He will join in as soon as
I now request Mr. Harpreet. Harpreet, are you there, please? Yeah. To give his presentation on post-search investigations, appraisal reports, statements and retractions, etc. Harpreet is an advocate on record in the Supreme Court and specializes in taxation. He has long experience in advisory and litigation aspects of corporate tax, domestic and international, including transfer pricing. He has done a lot of cross-border advice and investments, tax planning, structuring, and has acted for preeminent clients. Please welcome Mr. Harpreet Ajmani, please.
Thank you so much, Anilji, and PhD Chambers for inviting me. Search and seizure. It's a very interesting and never-ending cycle, I'll say, in terms of the development of law on this subject. The topic which I have, I'll primarily start with Rule 112A, where inquiry under Section 132 that has been discussed. So once the search proceedings are concluded, the investigating officer has the power that, based on the documents which have been found during the course of the search and other material which has been seized or found during the course of the search, the investigating officer may further inquire about these particular evidences and documents by calling or summoning the respective persons involved on whose premises the search was conducted. In this process, the investigating officer has the power to record statement, has the power to call for further details, examine the person on oath, and even call for further documentation. So there are multiple powers which are vested with this, with the income tax, with the investigation wing, post-search, while doing the post-search investigation. In this background, one of the special ingredient, or once the inquiry has been concluded, the investigating wing which is there, who has conducted the search, is obligated to draft a appraisal report. That's an internal document which primarily has its genesis in terms of the handbook and the internal manual of the department. There are handbook and the whole process is there, how appraisal report is to be made. So this is basically an internal document prepared by the investigating officer or the investigation wing of who has conducted the search. And thereafter, this particular report is submitted to the principal commissioner, joint commissioner, and the assessing officer and the assessment unit, so that they have the benefit of all the documents and how the investigating officer and the investigating wing has seen the evidences which were there at the grassroots level. So therefore, it is very critical that once the search is concluded, from an income tax within the tax department point of view, they simultaneously start the exercise of preparing an internal report where a detailed process is defined, like the name and address of the groups which have been searched, particulars of the assessee who have been searched, the date of commencement of search, conclusion of search, then what are the different documents which have been found at the search premises, the premises which have been searched, the details of Panchnama, brief history of the case, any background of the matter, whatever they have got during the course of the search, then the depositions which have been made, statements recorded, inquiries made, all these things are basically briefly summarized in the appraisal report, and thereafter they are transferred to the assessment unit or the assessing officer so that they have the privilege of first-hand experience in terms of what the investigating wing thinks of the search document and the material. Once there are then internal process in terms of in how many days the appraisal report is to be forwarded, then what should be the content, whether any approvals are to be taken for if there is any delay on the part of the investigating team to draft the appraisal report, because these things are simultaneously going on during the inquiry stage. So the investigating wing also has the responsibility of conducting the inquiry, post-search inquiry based on whatever material they have. Simultaneously, they have to draft a appraisal report. Once the appraisal report is thereafter forwarded to the assessing officer, then the assessing officer has to independently examine the whatever the contents or whatever conclusions investigating wing has like drawn from whatever the documents they have found during the course of the search. So there has to be an independent application of mind by the assessing officer. If there is no independent application of mind, then naturally there could be a lot of questions being raised on his authority and the credibility of the assessment which would be framed based on the search material. Therefore, it is very important that the assessing officer forms an independent opinion based on whatever report he gets from the appraisal in the appraisal report. Recently, before the Rajasthan High Court, in the case of Surendra Pal Singh versus Union of India, this is a civil writ petition number 8968 of 21. This is judgment dated 19th August 21. A very interesting issue came that whether the assessee is entitled to ask for an appraisal report. The court thereafter rejected the contention of the assessee that no, you are not entitled to get a copy of the appraisal report. Although the manual of the department prescribed for creating such document, however, creating or maintaining an appraisal report does not have any statutory mandate. So this being an internal document of the department, a assessee per se does not have any vested right to get a copy of this appraisal report. So in that view of the matter, the High Court had rejected the request of the assessee to direct the assessing officer to provide a copy of the appraisal report. But what my view is that yes, the law which has been laid down in this peculiar facts was curtailed only to the extent of when the appraisal report was only considered by the assessing officer. However, one of the interesting facets would be that if the assessing officer has completely based his findings on the appraisal report without relying on any corroborative evidence, if those kind of peculiar facts and circumstances are there in the case, then the appraisal report or the reason for not providing the appraisal report may not be there with the tax department. So therefore, we have to closely analyze the facts because it's very fact-driven exercise. So we have to see how the assessing officer is using the appraisal report. If it is only for his internal consumption that he can just see the document and thereafter just deliberate or consider it, and thereafter post seeing all the evidences, if he is just making his own opinion, then technically providing a copy of the appraisal report is not there. It would not be justified. However, if the assessment order is based only on the appraisal report without supporting documents, then yes, since it would be in violation of principles of natural justice, if such kind of document are used against the assessee, then I think their case may be made out. The immediately next aspect, what I would like to touch upon is that it is a general practice followed by the department that during the course of search, whenever documents or material are found, post search or during the course of search, the investigation wing records statements. Now, what are these statements and what is its evidentiary value? It is of very important facet. From that point of view, first, I would like to highlight that Article 20 of the Constitution of India provides that no accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. That's a very settled principle, that I cannot be forced to become a witness in my own cause. So whether the immediately next question will, I think everybody would be considering, is that if this kind of fundamental right is provided in the Constitution itself, what would be the evidentiary value of these statements? So, and whether can somebody be compelled to depose against his own cause, so that such kind of evidence may be used against him during the course of assessment proceedings? And what is the authority of the assessing officer or the investigating officer to depose statement? So I'll answer all these questions in just a while. And for that purpose, the first and pertinent thing which I would like to highlight is that under section 132 and 131, 132(4) and section 131, the powers are vested with the income tax authorities to record statements. Under section 131, which deals with the power regarding discovery, production of evidence, etc., the assessing officer, deputy commissioner appeals, principal chief commissioner, and principal commissioner or DRP, they have been empowered under the statute in section 131 subsection 1 clause B to enforce the attendance of any person, including any officer of a banking company, and examining him on oath. So there is a specific oath act also. I'll touch upon that facet also. But under section 131, the income tax authorities are empowered to take evidence on oath. Similarly, under section 132(4), the power has been vested with the investigating wing that the authorized officer may, during the course of search or seizure, examine on oath any person who is found to be in possession or control of the books of accounts, documents, money, bullion, jewelry, or other valuable article, and any statement made by such person during such examination may thereafter be used in evidence in any proceeding under the Income Tax Act. Thereafter, even an explanation is there that the scope of this statement is not necessarily to be restricted to the seized document, but it can even go on the other issues. So once a investigation wing officer is recording the statements, he may not restrict himself to the documents, bullion, or the documents or material what he has seized, but he may also ask questions which are general, and to that effect, even that can be used as evidence during the course of the assessment proceedings. In this background, the first thing would be that what is the evidence? Why there is an importance of these statements being recorded, and how the assessing officer is going to utilize them during the assessment proceedings. So the word evidence has been defined under the Evidence Act, and it means all statements. Evidence means and includes, under section 3, all statements which the court permits or require to be made before it by witness in relation to matters of fact under inquiry, such statements are called oral evidence. Now, whether all oral evidences are evidences, so that has been further elaborated by proved. A fact is said to be proved when considering the matters before it, the court either believes it or to exist or consider its existence so probable that a prudent man ought, under the circumstance of the particular case, to act upon the supposition that it exists. Disproved, a fact is said to be disproved after considering the matters before it. The court either believes it does not exist or considered it non-existent so probable that a prudent man, under the circumstances, to act upon the supposition does not exist. So the relevance of highlighting the meaning of evidence is because once during the course of assessment proceedings, the assessing officer is going to rely upon the statements, it is very important that as a defense, the assessee proves or at least try to create his defense that how and what is the relevance of the statement. Because these statements in terms of the available judicial precedents are considered as one of the most important and credible source which can be used against the assessee. However, the caveat to it is that it can be used only as a corroborative evidence. It cannot be a substantive evidence. If the assessing officer hinges his case only upon these evidences, then the assessee may try to create a defense by saying that no, these are only statements and they are not supported by the corroborative, the substantive documents and are against the documents. Practically, what in my experience, what I have seen is that search may not always be that a very good exercise where the officers may not gel up that well, and even there have been instances where the assessees or the representatives of the assessees who are present at the premises, they feel a bit under duress or under coercion. They are forced to make certain statements, and thereafter they are bound to record it on oath. So once they are being recorded on oath, naturally they would be used against the company or against the assessee during the course of the assessment proceedings. Therefore, it is very important that during investigation, the company and its the management of the company and its employee and the employees who are present at the search premises are very diligent. And even thereafter, when the persons who are representing the company or the assessee before the investigating wing, they should take proper counsel of the advocates or the chartered accountants and be very clear that what are the documents which have been relied upon or seized during the course of the search, what is the relevance of those documents, how they are being inferred or being interpreted by the department, so that in advance you are well prepared in terms of justifying or taking a position that how what is the relevance of these documents, because naturally these documents are to be interpreted from the perspective of the company or the assessee, and then thereafter from the perspective of the department, because it's well settled that the department cannot interpret the contract, and they have to consider it from the perspective of the signing or the contracting parties. So therefore, these documents, whatever have been found during the course of the search and during the course of statements, when they are being relied upon by the department, cogent material or cogent preparation should be done by the person who's deposing it, and thereafter clarifying that what is the relevance of this document and what is the background of that document. This I'm talking in context of post-search. Now, during the course of search, if certain documents are being confronted to the officer, to the persons who are already present at the search premises, there have been instances where the people fumble on account of.
ठीक लग रहा है यहाँ पर? नहीं, in the firm कुछ सीख रही हो?
Mr. Wadhwa?
Ajay sir, request you to please mute your mic. So it's done.
Thank you, sir. So it is very important that during the course of investigation, where during the course of search, we have seen that normally the staff of the assessee and the even the management of the company and the in charge who are there at the premises during the course of search, they fumble, and normally they get into the pressure. So there like we had been doing dawn raids and giving preparations, but principally it is very important that whenever a person is recording the statement and deposing on oath, there is a very high gravity of responsibility there on the company and on that particular individual and its ripple effect on the assessee. Therefore, the statements are recorded very carefully, and the person who's making the statement should be 100% sure that whatever he is saying on oath should be correct, accurate, and should be in terms of letter and spirit with the arrangement between the parties. So what I may suggest is that in case if there is any doubt or ambiguity in the mind of the person who is deposing, that certain facts are not clear or he needs to verify the same. So rather than giving or making any statement blindly, he should just request the officer that, sir, I'm not aware about these facts, or at least I'm not clear about the correct position of facts. Therefore, please allow us some time to confirm the same. And normally, we have seen that the officers are very cooperative and diligent, and they understand that everything cannot be on the tips, because searches are not based on your pre-invitation. So you don't know that when and what is to be read and what is to be prepared with. Therefore, the person who is deposing should be confident and ask for time whenever he is having any doubts. Simultaneously, he may refer to the relevant papers, refer to the documents, and it is not necessary that he should try and give something blindly. So these are some basic do's and don'ts which we normally advise to our clients, that you should be first well prepared in terms of the documentations and everything. And because recently we are seeing that these searches have become quite frequent, and many of the assessees are facing this issue. So therefore, it's very important that the big corporate houses and the clients are well prepared with dawn raids, and they even drills can be organized for doing it, because it's not about hiding some fact. It is more from the perspective of optics, where something unnecessary, or if I don't know a fact, or if I know a partial fact, I should not give and say something blindly. Because if a marketing guy is asked something technical, he may not know everything about the whole business model. But only by being adventurous or just by being under duress and coercion, the people do make some statements. So it is from that perspective, it is very important that the company, the management, and the key persons who are there, they should be well prepared, that in case such eventuality happen, it is not only in relation to the income tax department, but a similar process is followed by all the departments of search and seizure. And therefore, a common platform is there for all of them. So the statements play a very critical role in that. They have been regarded as a very important source of evidence. So assuming that, yes, this thing has already happened. So the immediately next point would be that as soon as possible, if any incorrect fact has been stated, or a fact which is not supported by document is there, or inadvertently something has got is recorded, which in my personal capacity I don't know. So it is very important that that statement is being retracted at the first available opportunity. We should not wait and sit over it for months and months, so that the assessment proceedings are that retractions would be filed during assessment. No, that should not be the approach. Once a search is concluded, the first endeavor should be that everything, whatever statements are being made, they are correct, true, and full in terms of the available documents on record and the arrangement between the parties. That should be the first step. In case of any ambiguity, doubt, or any wrong information being there, then the retraction should be done at the first available instance. Then simultaneously, while recording the statement, it is also important that if I have said something, the same thing is recorded correctly. So when at the closure of the statement, whenever the verification is given on oath, it is very important that you thoroughly read the statement and ensure that whatever you want to convey, it's similarly as it is recorded. There is no difference, or any loose words are not used. If you don't know an answer, say no. If you know an answer, then try to give it as definitely as possible and as short as possible. Nobody is interested in the thesis or the general knowledge which you have on the subject. Basically, the answer should be short, crisp, and to the point whenever the statements are being recorded. So it is very important that statement, while recording the statement, these basic things are kept in mind. Simultaneously, at the stage of retraction, the law has been on both sides. I'll be honest. So when I say that law is on both sides, the retraction, what we have seen is the people make retraction as a general event, like, no, I don't agree with this. This was only given under coercion or duress. So these general statements may not be considered as a valid retraction, and retractions have to be supported by some cogent document or justification. So even retraction has to be very carefully drafted and drawn, and it should not be only a general line, because the statement recorded on oath has a statutory basis. Therefore, the courts have given a very high evidentiary value to the same, and they are regarded as a confession or an admission on oath. So once it is an admission on oath, the onus of rebutting the same is very high. Therefore, that retraction should be within reasonable time, specific, clear in terms of if any particular words or line is incorrect, we should draw a parity with the corroborative document by saying that this is the parallel document, and however inadvertently I've said this. Or if we are saying that the statement was recorded under coercion, then the basis of the same should be there with supporting documents. There are also instances, what we have seen is that if hypothetically, if no retractions were drawn, but the persons who have recorded the statement does not have the technical expertise, and they have made general statements or loose statements which have been misinterpreted, because both the things are possible, that the people who are making the statement may have some other perception and the person who is reading it may have some other perception. This is a very general practice. So in that kind of eventuality, there is a concept as expert evidence. So in terms of where some technical inputs are there, what we have in terms of practice, what we follow is that we try and bring it or support it with evidentiary value of the expert testimony, that the statement which have been recorded maybe by let's say a legal guy or a marketing guy in terms of an engineering thing, which is a subject to which I'm not a subject matter expert. If I'm not a subject matter expert and I've given some statement, first, it does not have that much of credibility. And if I can simultaneously support it by some cogent expert or a person who's an expert in that field, that would have a higher degree of evidentiary value. So this could be one of the way in which we try and examine and assist the assessing officer so that the correct facts are brought on record. And it is not a general exercise that the assessing officer, if he does not have the privilege of the technical evidence, like Bharti, I think would be a classic case where even the Supreme Court has considered the importance of these expert testimony, and thereafter they have restored the complete batch matters which were there to the assessing officer, because neither the assessing officer is a technical person nor the assessee who had deposed or given the statement they were technical expert, and the whole proceedings were going on that basis. So therefore it is very important that who's recording the statement and who's deposing the statement, they both should be on the same page, that what is being communicated is correctly interpreted also. The next point, what I would like to highlight is that since these statements are recorded on oath, there is a specific oath act, that is the Oath Act 1969. The oath, to my understanding, which is given before the income tax authorities, should be driven by the general principles laid down under the Oath Act, because that would be the parent act which should govern the evidentiary value of such statements. So in that context, one of the clauses under section 6 of the Oath Act, it prescribes the forms of oath and the affirmation. It says that all the oaths and affirmations are to be administered by the presiding officer of the court himself. So drawing parity with section 6 read with section 131 and section 132(4), it is very important that whenever a statement is being administered, it is in the presence of the concerned officer who is competent under the Income Tax Act, and he administers the oath also. So although this is a technical point, but yes, even this is a very important thing to be kept in mind, that it should not be like when the officer is not there, some junior is sitting there and he deposes the statement. Although it may tantamount to irregularity, but under section 7, this has been considered as an irregularity under the Oath Act itself. But to my mind, having said so, though it may be an irregularity, the evidentiary value of such document can be questioned on that account, that who has administered the oath and whether it is done properly, whether it is in compliance with the procedure and the form which has been prescribed under the Oath Act. Simultaneously, I may also touch upon the provisions of Evidence Act, which under section 17 deals with the admission. So once I'm giving my statement on oath, maybe during the course of search or maybe post search, they may be considered as an admission. So the law dealing with the Evidence Act should simultaneously be considered, and would be a relevant piece to consider the defenses, as well as from the income tax authorities point of view, that the basic principles to be kept in mind. Like the term admission has been defined under section 17 to mean an admission is a statement, oral or documentary, which suggests any inference as to any fact in issue or relevant fact, and which is made by any of the person and under the circumstances hereinafter mentioned. So it's the word admission has a very wide corollary. And as far as the oral evidences are concerned, oral admissions as to the contents of a document are not relevant unless and until the party proposing to prove them shows that he is entitled to give secondary evidence of the contents of such document under the rules, or unless the genuineness of a document produced is not in question. This is under section 22 of the Evidence Act. Why I am highlighting this is that the whole process of search and recording of statement, retractions, these are all procedural concepts where the Evidence Act and the general law would also have a very wide bearing. And therefore, it is very important that the basic principles of natural justice and fair play are also duly accounted for. Now, as far as the retractions are concerned, I was just touching upon the retraction, that how retractions are to be done. Now, the next facet would be that if to what extent what is the relevance of these retraction and at what stage it is to be done. So in PCIT versus Roshan Lal Sancheti, this is again a Rajasthan High Court judgment. So if there was, since in this case, this is ITA 47 of 2018, order is dated 30th October 2018. The Rajasthan High Court has, in this case, has found that since there was a unreasonable delay on the part of the assessee to retract the statement, then the court has declined to take into account the retractions. And they said that no, there is no valid justification for this delay. Then in Lake Raj Dhunna's case, Punjab and Haryana High Court has said that 344 ITR 352, that if the retraction has no possible explanation for the retraction is given, then even on that count, the retraction cannot be used as evidence. And the statement recorded on oath would have a evidentiary value, and the same would be used against the assessee. Then they have again reiterated that the admissions recorded on oath have a significant evidentiary value and would be used against the assessee during the course of assessment. Then in CIT versus O. Abdul Razak, in this case, this is Kerala High Court, that retraction should not be a self-serving document, and it has to be supported by some corroborative evidence or some cogent material. Otherwise, that the evidence on oath would be considered rather than the retraction. Then there is one recent judgment again of Rajasthan High Court in the case of Bannalal Jat Constructions. Here, one of the factor was that though the statement recorded on oath by the income tax authority are only corroborative evidence and they are not conclusive proof of existence or non-existence of a fact. But if they are not rebutted properly, then in that scenario, they can be used against the assessee and the assessment can be framed on that. So this decision has been confirmed by the Supreme Court also, Bannalal Jat Construction. This is 2019 106 Textman.com 128. Now, having said this, one legal issue which though has earlier come before the Supreme Court was that what is the evidentiary value of a statement recorded under 133A, that is during the course of survey, vis-a-vis a statement recorded during search. So there the Supreme Court in the case of S. Khader Khan and Son has upheld the decision of Madras High Court and the SLP was dismissed. There the Supreme Court said that the Madras High Court has propounded the law that under 133A, the officer does not have the power to record the statements on oath. So since he does not have the power to record these statements on oath, the statements does not have any evidentiary value. This I am comparing vis-a-vis 132.4 versus 133A, that is statements recorded during search vis-a-vis a statement recorded during survey. This is one of the distinction, and the relevance is that these are the technical points which normally the courts face when they are dealing with the validity and when they are considering the evidentiary value of these statements and the retractions. The last point, what I would recommend is, from my practical experience, is that while recording the statement, we have practically tried in certain cases, and we were fortunate also that even while though there is no straitjacket law on this subject, but being cordial with the officer normally helps, and you may also request for a counsel being present there when the statement are recorded. Although strictly speaking, it is not envisaged under the law. And I'm not saying that it is supported by judicial precedents, but as a practical experience, what we have seen is that yes, a request can be made that while recording the statement, even only as a spectator, as a silent spectator, let an independent lawyer be present there, so that at least that element of coercion and duress can be avoided. And normally the officers have been cooperative, at least in my limited experience, what I have, that they allow us to sit there. Naturally, the lawyer cannot advise you or opine during the whole statement process. Nobody can interfere, but the presence can at least make the person confident that nothing undue is going to happen with him. Even that confidence is very important. So this kind of request may be tried with the officer, maybe tried as an option. So although it's not provided directly under the law, but yes, this kind of request, the officers had been cooperative and allowed this kind of request. Then reading of deposition, I've already covered. That's it from my side. I've tried to capture as briefly as possible, but there are ample of judgments and on this particular subject regarding the statements, retraction, and post-investigation exercise which is being done. So it's very fact-driven exercise, and the facts are to be seen very closely. How and this particular investigation process is to be taken care of. And therefore, it's always advisable that a lawyer or a chartered accountant is closely involved in case where searches have been conducted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harpreet. That was very comprehensive. You said briefly, but it is comprehensive, so which makes it better. It is much more than brief and very interesting. Can I just add one or two quickly points on this? You are not directly entitled to copies of the statement recorded during the search. And if it is used against you, you will get a copy. 132 subsection 4 statement is the statement itself. If something is taken from you subsequently in a letter, even if that letter says, continuing with that statement, that letter is not on oath and is not a 132.4 statement, thus not having such evidentiary value. A police search statement is not a 132 subsection 4 statement because it has to be in the course of the search. You've already mentioned about counsel, but you are ordinarily going to be entitled to counsel during investigation. Similarly, you don't have the right to cross-examine. Being at the investigation stage, you are the accused, you are not entitled to cross-examine. The statement by an unauthorized manager who is not informed of the matter and is not in a position to know the facts of that matter, that has little binding effect. And so on. On retraction, let me quickly tell you, it has been very well said by Harpreet, but let me quickly tell you some essentials. Your retraction should come fast and quick. Retraction after 3 years is unlikely to be accepted. You should have some credible evidence, or at least you should be able to say that I cannot prove a negative. If you made me give a statement in the air and you have no evidence, then it's for you to prove that that statement of mine was correct. How can I prove the negative? So, statement as far as department is concerned, or an addition which can be sustained is concerned, such statement should be supported by cogent, substantive, credible material and evidence to justify the adverse inference. If you want to retract, it is retraction of a statement given on oath then put in an affidavit on oath giving your retraction. If you claim that it was coercion, undue influence, and that it was not voluntary, then justify it. There are circumstances and facts. Search went on for 4 days. Statement given middle of the night. You are a heart patient and the matter was going on for long. As soon as the confession so-called was done, search was closed. So these are the sort of factors that are there, which will, in a manner, evidence that what you are saying is correct, that it was not voluntary. And Harpreet very nicely mentioned that you can explain things when you do not know them fully, that I do not know this, and no man is a computer. There are things where we are better than computers as human beings. And some of that, is reducing. But I don't have the data bank memory of a computer. So I'm perfectly entitled to say, I will see my records. I will ask my accountant, please see the tax department's records. I do not remember. Do you have a bank account? Yes, sir. What's the balance, sir? I don't know by perfect memory. Let me check from the bank and tell you. And the officer, in all fairness, will say, fine. But you say my balance is 2 crores 30 rupees. Then, why did you say so? So for God's sake, you don't need to say so. You can say, sir, aap dekh le bank se, main dekh ke bata deta hu na. So I'm not a computer. And where you say, give me time, let me see my records, please see tax department's records and so on, you are perfectly justified to do so. Anyway, Harpreet, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. My next speaker is, I can see Rohit is here. Rohit, would you like to go now or should I continue with, and you come in later? What would you like
Sir,
to
I
do?
can start. I can start if you permit, sir.
Yes, I would like to, because there was a sequence. First, there is a search, then there are proceedings. First,
I'm
you
so
give
sorry,
a
sir.
statement, then you do a retraction. So I have already gone to step 2, but I'm
I'm so sorry. So sorry for that.
No, you were in court and court is first. So Mr. Rohit Jain, please, on search proceedings and assessees' rights and obligations, taxpayers' charters, ground rules, and also just touching on 132A, because most of it was then in a manner along with section 132. Rohit, I have already introduced you. Please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So I hope my PPT is visible on screen.
I can see it. I hope everybody can.
Yeah. So basically, thank you, PhD, and thank you, Anil, sir, for giving me this opportunity to be dealing with, search and some part of the search proceedings. So I'll be touching upon basically the search proceedings, some of the portions of pre-search inquiries authorization, and then the taxpayers' rights and obligations during the search proceedings. And the subsequent part, as Anil sir mentioned, has already been covered by Harpreet. Now, as we move forward, basically my presentation is into 2 stages. In fact, I'll come to the first. As we know, the search is basically a methodology to look out or seek out some detail or tax evasion. That's a method adopted by the income tax department or any other investigative agency to gather evidence about tax evasion, unearthing back money, etc. The search when we talk of income tax provisions, section 132, it is broadly we can categorize into 3 stages. One is the pre-search inquiry and authorization. The second stage is actual conduct of search. The third is post-search proceedings. So I'll be concentrating on first 2 stages, which is pre-search inquiry and the actual conduct of search. And in the course of these 2, deliberating on these 2 stages, I'll be dealing with some of the rights as well as the duties of the taxpayers during the search proceedings. Now, coming to the stage 1, which is the pre-search inquiries and authorization. So basically, when we talk about search, the search is, search is based on a more substantial pre-search inquiries and information which is usually gathered by the income tax department. This is for the simple reason, the search is invasion into the privacy of any person, and it can be accessed. The search provisions can only be exercised, or the authority to conduct a search can only be given by the highest competent authorities only on satisfaction of certain conditions, and those conditions are laid down in section 132. Now, in order to come to those satisfactory conditions as to whether or not those conditions are satisfied, usually one has to resort to pre-search inquiries and information. And these are some of these sources, and this list is only illustrative. This is not an exhaustive list. That these some of the pre-search inquiries and information can be in the form of statement of financial transaction which we furnish, private sources. Informers are the biggest source of inquiries. Then pre-search investigations which takes place. We normally receive notices under section 133, 131, etc. 130. So one thing which I just wanted to highlight in this context was, if we see section 131, it is important to see that it has two clauses, subsection 1 and subsection 2, subsection 1A. What is important for our purpose over here is 131 1A, because if we see section 131 1A, that talks of summons in the course of pre-search inquiries. So that is one of the important summons which should normally never be skipped, because if we do skip to comply with the summon under section 131 1A, that can itself be a ground to authorize a search, and therefore it is important to comply with a pre-search summon under section 131 1A. Now, as we all know, the search can be directed by the competent authority, which is specified in section 132(1). Basically, the Director General, Director, etc., which are all topmost income tax authorities as defined, and this is based on satisfaction of certain prerequisite conditions. Now, the competent authority must have tangible information only on the basis of which this search can be authorized. And these terms, the information, reasons to believe, these are terms which we usually refer to in the context of similar section 147 reassessment proceedings also. The sum and substance of the provision is that there must be tangible information. It should not be mere gossip or rumor, etc. Valid, definite, tangible and reliable information which should be available with the competent authority, which should allow him to come to a reasonable belief as to satisfaction of those conditions in clauses A, B, and C. Now, what is also important to bear in mind that section 132(1) talks of two expressions, reasons to believe and reasons to suspect. Now, reasons to believe is in the context of fundamental authorization for fundamental grant of authorization for conduct of search. And reasons to suspect is in the context of the place where the search is to be conducted. And I'll just deal with it in little detail in a little while, because these concepts are sometimes intermingled and interchangeably intermingled by the the taxpayers, and but important bearing. Now, search warrant. Now, in this context, what I wanted to refer to is what are the content of the search warrant. Many of us may not have seen the search warrant, but the broad content of the search warrant is set out in Rule 112, and the search warrant is in form number 45. Now, when we see this form 45, it has the important contents are the reasons to believe. So it says where the information is laid before the competent authority, and he has reasons to believe that either of the three conditions A, B, C are satisfied. Then it is followed by, and whereas I have reasons to suspect that such books of accounts, documents, etc., or undisclosed assets are kept at a particular premises. Now, here the distinction which needs to be kept in mind is the search is always assessee specific. So when we talk of the satisfaction of fundamental jurisdictional conditions of search, they are required to be satisfied in the context of a particular person. Thereafter, once the competent authority is satisfied, has reasons to believe with regard to authorization of search in the context of a particular person, then on the basis of our reasons to suspect, so he may have suspicion, as to where those documents or undisclosed assets may have been kept. So just to give an example, supposingly the competent authority has reasons to believe that Mr. A has concealed income. Now those concealed income or concealed in the form of concealed assets may be kept at the premises of Mr. B. So therefore, in case the competent authority has reasons to suspect that those undisclosed assets are kept at the premises of Mr. B, the search warrant will say that the search is authorized in the case of Mr. A, but with the reason to suspect that the documents or the undisclosed assets are kept at the premises of B. So what will be the premises which will be subjected to search will be the premises of Mr. B. But what is important to bear in mind is that just because the search team visits the premises of Mr. B, that does not mean that Mr. B is subjected to search. It is only the premises of Mr. B which is subjected to search. The search is only and only against Mr. A, not against Mr. B. So therefore, therefore it is important to understand these two important concepts, because it takes us to a very important right which has been conferred on the taxpayer, is that he is the tax team, the search team, as soon as they visit the premises, they are supposed to show the warrant of authorization to the person who is present at the time at that premises. When the person who looks at the search warrant, he should take care of looking into those contents, because search warrant, the copy of the search warrant is not given by the search team to the searched person. The search warrant is only shown and is taken back by the search team. So therefore, it is important to bear in mind the fact that once the warrant is shown and it is taken back, it is important to take note of those contents as to who the assessee being searched and what are the premises being searched. Because in case Mr. B can, since I explained in my example, Mr. B is not subjected to search. Therefore, the assessments of Mr. B cannot be reopened as if he is a search person. It is only Mr. A who is a search person, and his assessment will be like a search person. So this is an important this important aspect which I wanted to point out. Secondly, important thing is when we look at the search warrant, it is also important to see who is the authority who has authorized the search, because at times it is noticed that the authority who is authorized to issue search warrants is not the authority who has actually given the search warrant. Thirdly, it is also important to see when a search warrant is shown to us as to whether or not the search warrant has been completely filled. There have been complaints where the blank search warrants are usually carried by the income tax department or the search team. So unless we know all these the rights, we will not be able to exercise those rights and defend our position. So this is the first aspect which I pointed, that primary contents of the search warrant is the person searched, the premises searched, and it is important to also take note from the search warrant as to which condition I have not satisfied, because of which the search has been authorized in the case of the person. So there are basically three conditions. One, I do not comply with the notices which has been issued. Two, there is an apprehension on the part of the competent authority that if a notice or a summons is issued to me, I will not comply with those notices. The third, that there is a reasons to believe that I am in possession of undisclosed income or I am in possession of undisclosed asset. These are the three fundamental conditions, jurisdictional conditions, on the basis of which a search warrant can be issued. And these three conditions are mentioned in the form of the search warrant. And usually, whichever condition is satisfied in the case of the taxpayer, that is ticked, and the others are deleted from the search warrant. So when the search warrant is shown, it is important to take note of in the pretext of which condition the search has been authorized in my case. Then the fourth important thing is the identity of the officers who conduct the search, because it is not that anyone and everyone can visit your premises as part of the search team. There are the identity of the officer, the name of the officers is clearly mentioned in the search warrant. So it is important to take note of this content of the search warrant. Then it is also important to bear in mind that every person's there need not be separate search warrant. So a search warrant can have multiple names. So supposedly a particular company, a particular premises has 3 companies. The name of all the 3 companies can be put as part of the person searched. So that is also possible. Another important thing is taxpayers who are usually who are professionals, they should not be subjected to such, and there is an old CBDT instruction in that context. Blank warrants, the courts have frowned upon. Sometimes it is being found that the search team is carrying blank warrant, because that's something a very grave thing. That because ultimately, if the search warrant can be issued on the basis of competent authority having a reasonable to believe. Now carrying a blank warrant means you have issued a warrant without knowing who is to subjected to search. So that is clearly not permissible in law. So therefore, there are some of the precedents which have clearly the courts have frowned upon the blank warrants being issued. Then the presumption as to the books of accounts. Now this, of course, this is a rebuttable presumption. So 132(4)(a), when the documents are found in the possession of a person, their presumption is those documents belongs to that person, and the documents are correct. Now if the contents of the documents are adversarial, then those documents can be used against you also. Now usually a question arises, what is the remedy which is available to a person if the search is if you want to challenge the the validity of the search? Not technically speaking, the search cannot be challenged by way of appeals. There is no appellate mechanism which is available, because this is held to be an administrative action. The only remedy which is available to us or to a taxpayer who has been subjected to search and he feels that there is a the search is invalid, the only remedy which is available is to challenge it by way of writ petition. But an important amendment which has happened is that the search for the satisfaction note is normally not shared with the appellate authorities, but yes, the court can summon the search warrants and they can direct the search warrant and the satisfaction note to be produced before the court. So the only remedy is the constitutional court by way of writ petition. Now, invalid search, these are some of the principles. I'll not spend too much time on this, because these are very settled legal propositions, that what can be the premise of conduct of search, authorization of search. So for example, hearsay cannot be roaming practice, just because the information that there is a person having a roaring practice cannot be grounds to conduct a search. Last bullet which I just wanted to highlight was with regard to an illegal search. So supposedly I challenge a search and the search is declared illegal. Today the law as laid down by the Supreme Court in Puranmal is that even the the evidence gathered during the course of illegal search can be relied upon. It is still a valid evidence which can be used in the proceedings against the taxpayer. Now the question is whether this is still a good law after the Constitution Bench judgment in the case of Puttaswamy. There is a Bombay High Court judgment and there are other judgments also which have said that once the search is declared as illegal or the document which is relied upon so for example, sometimes there is a phone tapping which happens, which is not in accordance with law. Recently, the Delhi High Court has said that those, the evidence gathered in the form of illegal tapping of the, the phone calls cannot be relied upon. WhatsApp messages has been held to be inadmissible as evidence. And similarly, again, the issue would be whether in case of an illegal search, whether that evidence can be relied upon. Of course, that's an important question which probably the courts might be again asked to, adjudicate, particularly in light of this Constitution Bench judgment in the case of Puttaswamy. Now, the second, this is primarily the stage 1. Now, let me come to the stage 2 where, which is the actual conduct of the search. When the authorization has been given by the competent authority and he has authorized the authorized officer to visit your premises and conduct the search. My primary focus would be what are the rights and obligations. But in order to understand what are my rights and duties, it is also important to understand what are the powers which are conferred on the authorized officers. So these are some of the powers which I have, tabulated it based on various clauses of section 132, which basically is to enter the premises, directing the person who is found to be in possession of, the almirahs, etc., to break open the locks of the almirah, or to break open, they can also break open the locks of the premises if it is found to be locked and they are authorized to search it. They can, supposedly a person is present at the search premises, though on the basis of the suspicion, they can direct these, the personal search of that person also. He cannot insist that I may be allowed to, go out, but ultimately he may be allowed to go out, but the authorized officer can say, no, we will first, conduct a personal search in order to ensure you that you are not taking out any important document from the premises. Then inspection of the books of accounts, inventorization of, your stocks, etc., recording of statement, seizure of books of accounts, and bullion, etc., or undisclosed asset is one of the most important power, or I would say the most lethal power which is available with the authorized officer. The only exception is the stock in trade. Now, because of the amendment in law, stock in trade cannot be subjected to seizure during the course of such proceedings. Of course, an inventorization would happen and inventory would be prepared in order to, keep a record as to what are the stock in trade which is available. This part I have already covered, that, warrant of authorization, the search can be only in case of a person whose name is mentioned. So ensure that, these things, one must ensure that which is the company or the directors named in the warrant, the premises which is subjected to search, designation of competent authority, and the officers who have been authorized to conduct the search. No obligation to provide reasons to believe. This part I also covered. Now, this judgment of L.R. Gupta, I think, is one of the most important judgment in the context of search. And it, summarizes some of the very important, the duties as well as the rights which are available to a taxpayer in the course of the search. So what the L.R. Gupta basically says is that just because a person is subjected to a search proceedings, that does not mean his day-to-day affairs are should get affected. So, for example, in this case, Mr. L.R. Gupta was an advocate and his premises was searched and he wanted to go to court in order to attend to his court hearings. He was not allowed to go out and he, challenged it by way of a writ in the High Court. The High Court clearly held that just because Mr. L.R. Gupta has been subjected to search, that does not mean he should not be allowed to go out of the premises and attend to his daily affairs, attend to his daily professional, obligations. Court said that search does not, affect the freeness of the person. It is not a kind of a confinement of a person. The officers can continue with the search premises. They could have personally inspected the Mr. L.R. Gupta and should have allowed him to, go out to attend to his professional obligations. So therefore, this gives an important right that your day-to-day affairs do not get affected just because a search team, enters your premises. We, normally, as we all know, practically what happens is at times, I don't know whether this happens today or not, but what we used to hear was when a search team used to enter your premises, they would, take away your mobile phones. The phones were disconnected. The people were not allowed to move freely, even within the premises which is subjected to search. Technically speaking, that all is not allowed. Technically speaking, they are not supposed to take away your phone. Of course, the law says the person who is subjected to search or the persons who are present at the premises which is subjected to search, they cannot tinker with the evidences. They should cooperate with the search proceedings in all forms, in all the manner which is possible. They should not, they should not destroy any evidence or destroy any document which is available. But at the same time, Income Tax Department or the search team is also not permitted to, to not allow free movement of the persons, to not allow people to do their daily chores. The last is the notification or the instruction in the context of seizure of jewelry. Now, this is an old 1994 notification which basically lays down the jewelry which cannot be seized. And normally what we see practically also is the search team normally do not, seize the jewelry which is available, which is shown in the wealth tax records, 500 grams per married lady, 250 grams for unmarried, and 100 grams per male lady. So this is a right conferred on you. So when a search team visits your premises and you are able to demonstrate with evidence that in your wealth tax return you have shown particular, jewelry, that jewelry cannot be subjected to seizure by the income tax department or the search team. So this, in a way, is a valuable right which is available to you because of this notification. And this is important to bear in mind at the time of the search. So these are broadly the key rights which are available to a taxpayer, which have been given in the form of a taxpayer charter issued by the CBDT. So this clearly says, first, to see the warrant. And as discussed earlier, it is important to see the warrant, note the contents of the warrant, particularly the assessee search, the premises search, the person who has authorized the search, and the authorized officer who are authorized to conduct the search. At least these 4 contents should be clearly, taken note of and noted on a piece of paper. So for future reference, because search warrant is only shown. It is not given to you as part of your records. Second is to verify the identity of each and every member of the search team. So you can cross-verify the identity of the search team with reference to the names mentioned in the search warrant. Personal search of all members of the search party. This is a taxpayer's right which is given. I don't know to what extent this is practically possible, but that's a taxpayer right which is available to you. To insist on personal search of ladies by ladies only. Now this again is an important right. And this has also been discussed in that L.R. Gupta's judgment, wherein the court also said that ladies can only be subjected to personal search by a lady inspector. So that is a right which is conferred on you. Witnesses. Now witness plays a very important role. The law says 2 respectable persons of the locality must be witnessing the search. And that is given in the rule, that is given in the statute. What we normally see is people don't notice as to who the witnesses are. And as a matter of routine, what happens is the search team usually carries the 2 persons are, accompanies the search team, who ultimately become the witnesses of the search team in the search warrant and in Panchnama. Now, at times, the searches are being challenged on the ground of witness, because this is an important check which has been laid down in the statute in order to ensure that there is no abuse of power of the search by the search party. So this is an important right available to you. Allow children to go to school. As I mentioned, search does not mean affecting your day-to-day affairs. If there are children which are available who have to attend to the school, the search team cannot say that we will not allow these students or the children to go to school. Similarly, someone suffering for someone requiring a medical help, he can ask for a medical help. Just because there is a search which is being conducted, that does not mean the search team will not allow him to be attended by the medical team. To have meals. Now, in fact, there are judgments which says human rights cannot be violated in the course of the search. So a person is supposed to have meals at the time of during his normal time. So even in case your statement is being recorded and it is a lunch time, you can request the search team to discontinue the search or to suspend this recording of the statement for some time. Have your meals, have a reasonable time of have a reasonable time in between, and then again the statement can be recorded. But that's a right which is available to a taxpayer to have its meal. Copy of Panchnama. Again, this is very important. It's a right of the taxpayer to get a copy of the Panchnama. Now, Panchnama is basically a record. Panchnama is prepared at the end of the search. Panchnama records the entire sequence of the search. So Panchnama usually also contains the name of the person searched, the premises which is searched, the authorized officers who visits, the name of the witnesses who actually witnesses the search. It also contains what was found during the course of search. It also mentioned what is the prohibition orders, restraint orders. So Panchnama is basically a summary of the entire search proceedings. And this therefore becomes a very most important document in the course of the search. It has various annexures. It lays down, all the documents which are found must be clearly mentioned in the Panchnama. A document which is not mentioned in the Panchnama, which is not inventorized as part of Panchnama, is not recorded as a document found during the course of search. So therefore, it is important to see what is the Panchnama, what are the contents of the Panchnama, and what are the annexures attached to the Panchnama. So supposedly something which is not found during the course of search cannot be imposed or cannot be put as part of the Panchnama. Because once it is recorded in the Panchnama, it is presumed that it is found during the course of search. So therefore, it is important to take note of the contents of the Panchnama, because once the copy of the Panchnama is given to you, it is supposed to be countersigned and a copy is kept by the search team. So therefore, before signing the Panchnama and giving it back to the search team, it is important to verify the contents of the Panchnama. To have a copy of the statement used against the person. Now, as Anil sir also pointed out, or probably Harpreet also, you see, this statement is one of the most important part of the search action. As we all know, statement is a statement recorded under section 132(4). Now, statement can be used as an evidence against you subsequently. So therefore, it is important that the statement, we should be very, very careful in the course of the recording of the statement. And I'll deal with it in a little bit detail as we move along. While you have various rights, you have various duties also towards the search team. And these are some of the duties which you have towards the search team, which is to allow free and unhindered entry to the search party. You cannot stall the process of the search. So that is important. That's a duty which is there. Then this to see the warrant and sign the same. You cannot insist that I will keep the warrant. You only have a right to see and sign it and give it back to the search party. Identify and explain the ownership. So for example, something is found from your premises and the search team says that, look, identify who is the owner of this asset, what is the contents of those assets. You cannot say that, no, I will not speak. You may say that I will clarify it later, but you cannot say that I will not speak. So that is something which is important, to identify every individual in the search premises. So search premises, when the search team enters, they can ask you to identify the persons who are present at the premises. That's a duty. You have to identify those persons. To answer queries to the best of the knowledge. I think Anil sir also emphasized on this fact. You are required to answer. You cannot say that I will not answer. You can say that I don't remember, or I will verify and confirm it later. But you cannot say that I will not speak or I will not answer the queries. Answer the queries to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your ability, and whatever is correct. That's the duty which is there on the search person. To affix the signatures, there have been instances where the search team required the person whose statement was recorded to sign the statement and he ran away. That's not permissible. That's not permissible in law. You are supposed to sign your statement. Of course, at the same time, you have a right to see the contents of the statement. You have a right to ensure that the statement is recorded correctly. Whatever you stated has been recorded in the statement. That's a right conferred on you. But at the same time, the duty is to sign the statement which is recorded in accordance with what you have said. That's a duty. Fourth is not to remove any article. So as I pointed out, you cannot, tamper with the evidence. You cannot tamper with the material or the documents or the evidences which is available in the premises when the search team enter the premises. That's a duty which is there on the taxpayer who is available there. Now, this taxpayer charter is not necessarily in the context of the search, but this is a taxpayer charter which has recently been issued by the Income Tax Department. Why I have referred to this in the part of this search is there are two important things which are emanating from this taxpayer charter. One, this taxpayer charter has been statutorily recognized because this has been issued in terms of section 119A of the Income Tax Act. So this becomes a binding code on the Income Tax Department. That is one. Secondly, when we read this Income Tax Charter, it has some of the important, rights and commitments of the Income Tax Department, which in a way are the rights which are available to you both in a non-search case as well as a search case. Now, some of the things is, so for example, one is to provide fair, courteous and reasonable treatment. Now there is a search which happens. So that doesn't mean that you are being subjected to search, the team will be non-courteous. So they have to be courteous to you even during the course of search. They have to be reasonable and fair in their approach. Second is treat taxpayer as honest. Now, just because someone is subjected to search does not mean there is a presumption that he is dishonest. That cannot be the presumption. The presumption obviously has to be the taxpayer has honest, but there is a reasonable belief that there may be some escapement. And with that endeavor, the search team should visit the premises. That should be the attitude. The third is provide complete and accurate information. This may not be relevant. Respect privacy of the taxpayer. Now again, privacy of the taxpayer is also important, both in a not search environment as well as a search environment. So privacy of the taxpayer again becomes important, the rights. Maintain confidentiality. Now maintain confidentiality during the course of search. Substantial evidence may be found, substantial information may be found. Some of the information may be secret. So for example, I may be into business which has a certain secret formula. And during the course of search, the search team happens to, look into that to set confidential formula, which is available. Now, there is an obligation on the income tax department to maintain confidentiality of that information. Just because I am subjected to search does not mean my confidential information can be shared with anyone. That can be disastrous for a person who has been subjected to search. So there is a commitment by the income tax department by virtue of this taxpayer charter that they will maintain confidentiality of the information which is gathered which is gathered by them, whether that is gathered during the course of search or it is gathered in any other form. Then hold its authorities and accountable. These are, of course, provide a fair and just system, reduce cost of compliance. So this is basically a taxpayer charter. So these are some of the highlights which are relevant both in the context of non-search cases as well as the search cases. This I have already covered. Now the seizure. One more important aspect of search is there is at times a misconception that when a search team visits the premises, they can seize anything and everything. That's wrong. Seizure can only be of undisclosed asset or the documents which represents undisclosed or which are incriminating nature. Technically, that's the law. Technically, the law is a disclosed asset or a disclosed jewelry or a disclosed books of accounts should not normally be subjected to seizure. Indiscriminate search, indiscriminate seizure of documents is absolutely wrong. That is technically wrong. So seizure, of course, is forcibly taken to undisclosed assets, and these are some of the judgments. Of course, practically this may be difficult, but this may be relevant at a later stage. I think in the later part of the presentations, the deliberations will be as to what is incriminating, non-incriminating. In that context, there will be more deliberations as to where this this distinction becomes important. Seizure has to be of undisclosed asset. It should not be of a disclosed asset, provided you have evidence, you have evidence or documents to show that a document which is found or the asset which you are found to be in possession of is a disclosed asset. So in the context of jewelry, we refer to the wealth tax return. So in the wealth tax return, if you have shown some jewelry, it is deemed to be a disclosed asset. Today, in the context of present, supposedly in the Schedule AL of the income tax return, we disclose various assets. The assets which are disclosed in Schedule AL are presumed to be a disclosed asset. So they cannot be subjected to seizure. That's the point which I wanted to emphasize in this slide. So the seizure should be only of undisclosed assets. Similarly, prohibitory order or restraint orders can only be in respect of undisclosed asset. It cannot be in respect of a disclosed asset. As seizure, because prohibitory order cannot be in respect of something which cannot be subjected to search. That's the point which has been highlighted in this slide. Statement during search, I think Harpreet touched upon this. What I will only seek to emphasize is statement during the search is one of the most important aspects. Few of the important aspects which I just wanted to highlight is Normally, a statement is recorded in the context of in order to, gather further evidence with regard to the documents and assets which were found during the course of search. Statements are subject to be supplementary in nature. These are not supposed to be this evidence per se. And if you see section 132(4), this gets substantiated. And that is why the courts have in various judgments said that the statements needs to be corroborated. Statements per se is not incriminating material. Statement per se is not incriminating. Statement have to be.
Rohitji, if I
Sir, I'll
request,
just conclude in 2 minutes, sir.
thank
Not
you,
more than 2 minutes.
thank you.
So statement per se is cannot be the basis of any addition. Another thing is you are not obliged to make any surrender in the course of state recording of statement, and that's the notification which are issued by the the CBDT. There are statements of the finance minister. You are not supposed to make a disclosure. Of course, on the basis of documents found, you can point out that these documents show some undisclosed income, and you can offer it for tax in your tax returns. But there cannot be a forcible surrender. In the course of recording of statements, it is important. The statement is usually not given. So it is important to note the contents of the statement. And what do we normally advise our client is, the person whose statement is recorded, based on, the memory, keep recorded somewhere for future reference. Because you may be asked to, make explanations as to the contents of your statement at a later point of time. This part I have already covered, so I'll skip out because of the time constraint. Last is requisition. Requisition is something little different, that where the authority, for example, the custom authority has some material against you. Now the income tax department can issue a requisition under section 132A to call for that, and that will be a requisition under section 132. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. I'm again sorry for being late, and thank you, PhD, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Rohit. That was brilliant as always. And as I had the good fortune to mention in the beginning, the participants would certainly have the pleasure of listening to genuine experts who would be talking with their knowledge and, as importantly, with their vast experience and expertise. Thank you, both Rohit and before that Harpreet, for demonstrating that. It is always tempting for me to add some interesting points, but I will desist from doing so in the interest of time. My next speaker is Tejveer. Tejveer is talking about the penal and prosecution consequences of a search. Tejveer is an advocate. He's a chartered accountant, a lawyer. He has almost 20 years of experience. Again, a vast exposure, both in advisory, litigation, top law firms, all sorts of matters. He has also been involved in financial fraud investigations, which is directly related, so to say, to the topic of the day, investigations. He has been senior standing counsel, where he has advised and represented the income tax department, with key focus on international tax and issues surrounding BEPS and transfer pricing cases. He has more than 150 judgments to his credit and accomplished important matters for the clients as well as for the income tax department. So well-balanced, both sides of the picture, and it is balance on both sides that we like to focus on in this webinar and in PhD. He's also got all sorts of very meaningful experience, which enables him to expertly discuss his topic of the day, such as with CBI or DRI or Enforcement Directorate or SFIO, the Serious Fraud Investigation Office. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tejveer Singh, please, on penalties and prosecution.
Thank you so much, Anil sir, for such a generous introduction. And of course, thank you, Anil sir, for and PhD Chamber of Commerce for giving me an opportunity to speak and share whatever little I've experienced over the years. And I've had the opportunity to hear Harpreet and Rohit also, and very interesting views they had. It was quite exciting so far. So since we are constrained with time, so let me just start straight away, come to the topic. I'll share my screen and it's coming. Zoom is coming. Okay, yeah, I think the screen is coming. In the meantime, I'll start sharing my views. See, with respect to penalties in prosecution, now what the government is trying to do, the intention of the legislature is to separate the penalties of search as well as the non-search cases. Stop broadcast. Okay, there is some problem. Just see that slides are not coming. Yeah. That's how they intend to structure the law now. If we broadly see the penalties for search and seizure, which is if you make admissions of undisclosed income during the course of the search, there's been a shift out of 2016. There was a certain kind of law before 2016, and there have been changes, and new law is applicable after 2016 till date. So if we see this before 2016, broadly there were three tax rates which were prescribed for 10%, 20%, and 60%. For 10% tax rate, the basic conditions were: first, if the assessee admits an undisclosed income and which was earned in a specified manner and discloses a specified manner. Actually, this manner is the most significant part of the penalty, so which of course we'll discuss in a little more detail after we looked at the provisions. Then he substantiates or validates the manner in which such income has been earned. And of course, the other two conditions are very minimalistic. One, he pays the tax and interest before the due date, and he files his income tax return before the specified date. Now, this is the 10%. Now, if 20%, now suppose that he does not admit to it, but he still declares his income and in the income tax return and pays tax, he's liable to 20%. If none of the conditions are fulfilled, meaning if he doesn't fall within the 10% conditions he's not able to fulfill, or 20% he's not able to fulfill, if there's a violation of any of it, then he falls within the ambit of 60% of the tax rate. Now, after 2016, an amendment has been made. Only two tax rates are provided. One, 30% and 60%. So 30% for the conditions are the same, which I've mentioned for 10% tax rate. So I'll just repeat broadly what are the conditions that you need to fulfill today if you just want that penalty of 30% should be imposed. One, you admit that there has been an undisclosed income during the course of the search. You specify the manner in which such income has been earned. Third, you validate or substantiate the manner in which such income is earned. Fourth, you file your income tax return before the prescribed date, and you pay your tax and interest before the specified date. Now, what is the manner of earning the income? So first of all, if we see that in the bill, I'm sure then the search and seizure, most of the people covered would be earning their income from under that business and profession. So if there is an undisclosed income, most likely the possibility is twofold. One, there is some revenue which you have not disclosed or booked in your accounts. Secondly, there is some dubious expenditure or bogus purchases you have made. Now, what happens is that suppose there's an undisclosed income, say 10 lakh rupees cash has been found, or some documents has been found that where the property has been which you have not shown in your books of accounts. Now, the department going to ask you first question, and through which source, how did you get this money of 10 lakhs? Now, these are the only two ways. Now, you say that, for example, by your bogus purchase, you made certain entries in the books of accounts and through which you got this entry. So this is a manner, and of course, you need to avail the benefit of 30%. I mean, whether it is a benefit or not, we'll come to that a little later. But to avail this benefit of 30%, you need to provide the manner. You need to provide exactly how this undisclosed income is earned, and is it a job of the assessee to explain this? Now, actually, there are many practical problems associated with it. Like to take a simple example of this only. Suppose you say that there are certain bogus purchases are introduced in my books of accounts. Now, the problem will be that the department will try to disallow the whole of the expenditure which from the such party. So that is a very big problem. The offshoot happens in a very different way. And also what happens is that departments tries to double tax the income. There'll be repercussions for the other parties. It takes a shape which it should not be, which is actually quite a little contrary to the scheme of the act. Now, if you see, then in fact, as Anil sir were also mentioning that there is a circular issue in 2013 which says that the department should not try to extract the confession, rather try to collect the evidence. That should be the job of the assessing officers. Now, in synchronization with that, the meaning of the scheme is so that the disputes are settled. But and we also practically know that the department, I don't think that has been cases where they have accepted the manner which is disclosed by the assessee. But the point is, and actually there are a few nuances to it which we can take care of it while if we decide that we say that we are willing to make a disclosure and willing to pay the penalty. One is, suppose a notice is issued under section 131(1)(a), of course, which I think Rohit has in great detail explained. Suppose if notice is issued to 131(1)(a) and you make a disclosure during the course of recording a statement under section 131(1)(a), then if you made the surrender or say admitted to the some undisclosed income during that during the statement being recorded under section 131(1)(a), then in respect of such, this section 271(aa)(b)(1)(a) cannot be invoked. So that is one of the things that we need to consider. Secondly, the section 271(1)(a)(b) penalty is discretionary in nature. It's not mandatory. As if we see from the section itself, the word may is used. It's like, so it gives, so it's the reasonable interpretation. The assessing officer has discretion to impose it. And also, section 274 will also be applicable, which provides that before imposing the penalty, assessing officer is supposed to give an opportunity of hearing. So when the fact that there is an opportunity of hearing means you're trying to give the other party and explain why penalty should not be imposed. So it's not that it has to be mandatorily imposed. Now, so, and there are a few other things I would just like to highlight. Like, for example, many a times what happens is if there is a search being conducted on you, the section 153C is invoked. So 153 says if during the course of the search, some money, bullion, jewelry is found which belongs to some other person, then search person can also be searched. But section 153 is invoked in respect of that. But if your search is under section 153C, then the penalty under this section cannot be invoked. So this, I think we should just need to keep in mind. Also, the section, see, whenever the penal provisions are invoked, they have to be constituted strictly, because these are considered the violations of a personal liberty and somewhere does impingement. So that is why the penal provision has to be construed strictly, and the application of mind has to be there. Of course, application of mind is there in while deciding or adjudicating any kind of a dispute, but with vis-a-vis penalty issues, the onus becomes a lot higher. So that is why while imposing the penalty under section 271(a)(b), they have to provide exactly as to which limb under they are trying to tax. They have to very specifically provide which subclause they are trying to invoke. I think the similar issue disputed arose earlier with respect to section 271(1)(c). Also, now another thing is that it is provided in the section only that once if the penalty is imposed under this section, there is no penalty under section 270 or 271(c) for underreporting or misreporting. For underreporting and misreporting under 270(a) or section 271(1)(c) cannot be imposed. Now, if we see now, suppose that the penalty, the department decides to impose the penalty, then I think, okay, so this is so far the penalties of this in respect of search and seizure is concerned. We'll take certain facets as when we discuss the prosecution. Now, suppose the department starts to initiate prosecution due to any of the violation of the search proceedings, which empowers the department to initiate proceedings. So first of all, the broad general guidelines which are laid down in circular number 24 of 2019. The process for initiating the prosecution that needs to be considered is basically this circular embodies the principle of the natural justice. Now, first thing that needs to be done is we need to identify the cases of the non-compliance. The departmental officer has to identify the cases of the non-compliance. Though there is, so far the circular is 2019, there is no monetary limit is prescribed, but there is a provision. So we need to say how it plays out in the times to come. So once they identify the case of non-compliance, then they issue you a show cause notice specifying the allegation against you. And an important thing to be considered here is the allegation has to be very, very specific, and they have to provide you an opportunity to defend yourself. Now, in response thereto, the assessee is required to provide explanation and all the evidences that are available with him. Now, if there is reasonable cause or the assessee can justify it, and broadly, see, mens rea is a very important ingredient of the penal provision. So if assessee is able to prove somehow that he intended to adhere to the law because of certain circumstances, so these broadly are the cases when penalty should not be imposed. But we all know the functioning of the department. Unfortunately, they get lower zealous and aggressive in their stand. But rightfully speaking, if there is no mens rea or these conditions are fulfilled, then the penalty should not be imposed. Now, if the tax authorities are not satisfied, then what happens is that they initiate, first of all, the concerned officers initiate the prosecution, and then they will seek the approval of the respective commissioner who will authorize the prosecution, and then the complaint will be filed before the magistrate court. We'll just look at what is the procedure when the matter reaches the magistrate court. But broadly, I think if you can keep few things in mind. So when the matter travels to the magistrate court, broadly three are the conditions when the penalty, the prosecution person should be off the prosecution. One, if there is the assessee can demonstrate that there is no provision of the law is violated. The second, if there is genuine reason for being violation. And third, there was no willful intention on the part of the assessee to do so. Now, are these conditions cumulative or exclusive of each other? That depends upon facts and circumstances of the case. It's not like they have to be in different silos or all together have to be fulfilled. But I think that broadly it fluctuates between all kind of an arguments which fluctuate between these three broad headlines we have just seen. Now, if we see under search provision, under the search, the prosecution can predominantly be launched under three provisions. One is your 275A. Now, I think Harpreet had just mentioned about section 132(1). So section 132(1) authorizes the search with the prescribed authority on the basis of information in his possession and has reason to believe. Actually, these are quite stringent conditions. Then he can issue the summons if he is of the view that the person will not produce books of accounts, or if he's in possession, or is the view that the person is in possession of the money, bullion, jewelry, etc., on which tax has not been paid. Then they may enter enter and search any of the building, and where such books or jewelry, etc., is kept. Now, there is a second provision to section 131, which says that where it is not practical for the departmental officers to take physical possession of the article of thing, so they may pass an order that nobody should remove this without the authority of the officers concerned. So actually, I think this section has been practically also been used many a times, because there are many times which items are there which is not very feasible for them to take, because right now they also have probably infrastructural issues. So they like to invoke this section, and if there is a violation of this section, down it is, and so which means if there is an order passed that you cannot tinker with such article of things and you try to do that, then the prosecution can be launched against you for such violation. Now, there is section 275B also, it says that where if an officer enters the building, I think Rohit has also mentioned this provision where he said that you cannot stall the process. Actually, this is a penal in nature. If an assessing officer enters the building and requires you to facilitate the search, but you don't facilitate the search but try to restrict his entry, then this is also be punishable with a rigorous imprisonment. And the third is, of course, your section 276 CCC. Now it says if you do not file your tax return willfully, then there is an imprisonment for the purpose. So these are the broad three provisions under which penalty can be imposed. I think these practical issues, I think we have just looked at it broadly. So I think this in this slide, I think if anybody wants to look into a little more detail, can delve into it. Now, next is, so these are broadly, if you can just broadly look at these provisions also. So, first of all, to initiate a prosecution, the section 190 of CRPC is relevant, under which the cognizance is taken by the magistrate. So we'll look into it when we discuss the process as to how the prosecution matters proceed. This next is the department can impose the penalty, but punishment cannot be imposed by the department. For that, they have to invoke the IPC, your CRPC only, and the only magistrates have the power to do so. So, but however, there are two provisions in the CRPC which authorizes invocation of the criminal procedures and and punishment on punishment against the assessee. So one is assessing officer is considered as a public officer, and if you intentionally refuse, then it is a punishable offense. And the second one is if there's a falsification of accounts or ITR, then this is also you can be imprisoned for this. Now, if we broadly want to look at it as to the process under CRPC, now the first thing that happens is your complaint, you file magistrate, the department files a complaint under section 190. Under section 190, the magistrate take cognizance of the offense. Now, after that, there is section 203 of the CRPC, where the magistrate has power for suo motu dismissal if there is no sufficient ground, which means suppose the department files a complaint and the magistrate of the view that the complaint is frivolous, then he can dismiss the complaint. But practically 203, I don't think has ever been invoked in the case of income tax matters. Then comes the section 204. So after the complaint is filed, the summons are issued to the assessee that the prosecution proceedings are initiated against you. Now, after the summons are issued, the assessee is required to represent himself before the magistrate court. And if he does not do so, normally there will be non-bailable warrants will be issued against him first. Now, if non-bailable warrants are issued, it's actually quite a simple process that, they normally on a surety of 10,000 rupees. I'm just giving a ballpark. If you give a surety of 10,000 rupees, then it is considered to be sufficient compliance, then you can attend the hearing during the course of the next proceeding. Suppose you don't attend even if after non-bailable warrants, then the bailable warrants are issued to you against you. Now, if bailable warrants are issued, then you have to seek a anticipatory bail, and then you can go and attend the hearing, and probably your bailable offense, your bailable warrants, non-bailable warrants will be called off. And if you see broadly all the offenses, most of the offenses under income tax department, and these under the search provisions also are bailable. So criminal procedure code CPC section 436 is applicable, and in which you can very easily get a bail. So the bail you have, that is never an issue. But the point is that in certain offenses which are not non-bailable, or if you look at it, under the Black Money Act, I think that the Gaurav is supposed to speak in great detail on that. Under Black Money Act also, the imprisonment is more than 7 years, and most offenses under Black Money Act are non-bailable. So in those cases, or an income tax department where the offenses are non-bailable, the getting a bail is a little stringent, because then section 437 of the CRPC comes into act. Now, for the purpose of CRPC, there's certain things that the court looks into. One, the prima facie, if they view that the assessee is guilty or not, whether the earlier you have committed any non-bailable offense or any other reason, which is used in tax proceedings, things like risk of flight, how much is the age of the assessee, which is the possibility of tinkering with the evidences. So courts consider all this, and many a times in income tax, wherever they're non-bailable, the bail has been granted, if at least not the magistrate court, then definitely at the sessions court in appeal. Now, but I think that what happens is that practically most of the courts form a certain kind of a view and becomes a matter of the procedure. They make a premeditated mind. If you file a certain kind of a proceeding for certain kind of offense, then whether a bail will be granted or not. So it depends actually more on the local courts as to how to know whether actually in a particular offense a bail can be granted or not. So after the bail, after your bail is granted, then the next step is your main proceedings resume, and there's a very important part of the proceeding. It's called evidence before charge. Now, evidence before charge is when the income tax department of prosecution proves his case, and they bring down all the evidences which are against the assessee, and they cross-examine the witness. So that is the stage. First, the department proves their case. Now, one very important thing to be considered here is that since the matter are criminal in nature, the criminal CRPC is applicable. Indian Evidence Act is also applicable. Like when the normal assessment goes on, the strict rule of evidence, Indian Evidence Act are not applicable. But that is not so if the matter is before the prosecution. Your chapter 6 and chapter 7, which relates to oral or documentary evidence or burden of proof, all of them are strictly been adhered to. Now, one common mistake that the department makes many times is they don't bring the original document, they just bring the photocopy. So issue arises whether they're admissible or not. So on that account also, they cannot be of course, subject to the other factors concerned, they cannot be indicted. So after this stage, there's an issue of charge being framed. Since department has laid down all the evidence and everything, a charge is framed against you, stating what are the issues. Now, after the issues have been come out, stating what exactly is the charge, you are also entitled to counter it, and you can the prosecution side can lay down the whole of their case and call their witnesses and cross-examine the other party and say as to why these charges are not correct against the person. Now, after that, after your evidences stage is over, then a written statement can be is required to be submitted. Now, after you submit the written statement, normally no new evidences can be filed except with the leave of the court. There are some special provisions, but normally it is not invoked in most of the cases. And after which there's a final hearing, and your process is adjudicated. Now, after the adjudication process, now this seems very simple on of it, but actually it takes long time to do it. I mean, even if the prosecution cases, there are cases which were, prosecution cases filed in 1990s and still going on. But having said that, there are many cases which were only filed 4 to 5 years back, and they have also been decided. So it depends upon the facts and circumstances of each of the case and what is the situation of the court. But this is broadly the process which is followed for the prosecution of the cases. Now, if we look at what assessee can do, suppose a prosecution is filed against someone, then what is the things that they can do? Of course, bail. Now, bail, I think at least with respect to search and seizure, the section 436 is applicable, and I don't think bail is a problem. You can get the bail. Now, the second is challenging of the summons. Suppose a summon is issued to you, and you say that I'm not even responsible against in any way in the committing of this offense. Then you can challenge the summons before this magistrate, and the summons for quashing of the summons. Now, very rarely, but do we get relief in challenging the summons? But income tax department, I don't think in many cases that has been done. Now, the other stage is that you can discharge before evidence before charge, meaning all the before the evidence or has been stayed, something, suppose some major issue point is there with you, which you think that you have been unfairly dealt with, and some major factual issue which the prosecution side is missing. In this case, you can file discharge before evidence before charge, and this is a remedy which has been availed many a times, and actually SSCs have succeeded on many accounts. So other than that, I think there is provided that specifically the section 275A and 275B cannot be compounded. Other than that, I think there's a provision for the compounding of the offences also. Now, the only thing is that there are certain guidelines were issued for compounding, which stated that the compounding has to be finished within a period of 2 years. But I think that the decision of the Bombay High Court has come in the case of foot candles, which states that the compounding guidelines are not mandatory and does not override section 279, which relates to the compounding of the offences. And in fact, in the case of foot candles, the person was sentenced with the magistrate, and the session court has suspended the sentence, and still the compounding was filed. So these are broadly the provisions. Only thing is, one thing I would like to highlight, the only thing is that right now the settlement commission has been abolished, and the settlement commission had the powers to provide immunity from prosecution and from penalty, but that is not the case. Hence, considering this factor, the penalty and prosecution has become a very important. And but still, my view would be that if the not to admit anything before the assessing officer during the course of the search, because that kind of very restricts your in many ways. For example, later on you want to claim expenditure also, then you will not be entitled to do that. And I think, as Harpreet and has also mentioned, that on something on the similar lines. So I think that to avail this, to thinking that if you surrender and if you think that you'll be better off, I mean, depends upon the facts and circumstances, but broadly it doesn't seem to be the case. So I think, sir, I have concluded well within time. And but I'll be happy to take if anybody has any question, or if in case, Anil sir, if you wish that I should elaborate on anything.
Tejveer, thank you. That is extremely comprehensive and useful, and your presentation has also been, as the other two before you, superb and very interesting. And every time even I listen, I keep learning something. And that is the joy of these interactions.
Yeah, so whatever little, I mean, we're looking forward to views of Mr. Ajay Wadhwa also, and there are some other esteemed panelists.
Yes. So our next speaker of the day is Ajay Wadhwa, as you said. Ajay will be speaking on search assessments, both under the current scheme, under the old scheme of 153A, and he will also touch the CBDT circular pursuant to decision in Abhisar Bidwell of Supreme Court, and whether pursuant to that decision, the CBDT circular has laid down correct principles and propositions, which many of us believe are going to lead to internecine litigation in times to come. Ajay also perhaps needs little introduction to the audience. He is president of the ITAT Bar. He has an immense amount of experience in litigation, in search cases, in advisory, and almost every facet of income tax practice he has been involved with, and at all levels, from the original side to the highest courts. He is a chartered accountant cum lawyer, more than 3.5 decades of experience, and again for all kinds of clients. So a huge canvas which has been covered, whether it's multinationals or Fortune 500 and others. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ajay Wadhwa, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil. Anil, you have always been so kind and very generous with your praise. This program, this seminar is truly, I quite agree with you that it is very illuminating, very refreshing, and sitting at one place, you really get to hear such brilliant views and so much of experience. Anil, before I begin, there is this phrase which is, if wishes could be real, life would be a dream. We all keep wishing, ye ho jaye, wo ho jaye, and we sometimes even think we can buy a wish, but you cannot buy a wish, and you can only think about it. But you remember the last time around when I spoke on your program, my wish was that we all have a great, sumptuous dinner at your place. And it came true. And it came true to the extent that all of us were there. Your very gracious, lovely wife took so much care and attention. Your children were there. And we had such a wonderful time with the excellent food, excellent hospitality. So I am now going to be very selective with my wishes because I know they'll come true whenever I pose them to you. So it's not going to be a dinner now, but let me think about it and I will share it with you in private because wishes with you, they come real.
Thank you, Ajay. Yeah.
And this topic that you've given me, initially I thought, well, it's really a little, it's a small, narrow topic, but I'm very thankful to you, honestly, when I went through it. It's a topic very close to my heart, not because of the issue involved, but of the generality of. So, Anil, with your permission, if you will permit me, I just want to express my views on what's happening and what are we going, what's happening to our country, which way we are headed. We thought litigation will reduce, but litigation seems to be galloping by the day. Now, just to give you an example before I start, my friends are aware of this judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Ashish Agarwal, where notices were issued under the erstwhile provisions of Section 148, and they were issued between the 1st of April 2021 to 30th June 2021, when the provisions of 148 had ceased to exist. They had been given life by a CBDT circular. And all the courts across the country were of the unanimous view that CBDT cannot legislate. Once the parliament has put an end to a particular legislation, CBDT cannot revive it. And therefore, all notices that were issued within the period I'm talking about, 1st April 21 to 30th June 2021, were quashed. The matter went to the High Court, and the High Court invoked Article 142, their extraordinary powers, the Supreme Court, and said, well, in order to do justice, we agree the department has made a mistake. We agree that it was beyond their jurisdiction to issue notices. However, we convert these notices into notices under 148AB. That is, we treat them as notices issued under the new law. All right, well within their power. So what happens? Thousands of assessments were reopened. Thousands of notices came once again. 90,000 appeals had been filed. They came back. Many more were issued, and then of course the process started. Now just see. I'm talking of now a judgment of the Karnataka High Court in the case of Kankala Ravindra. It's in the PPT, which is the last of the judgment. Can you just take it to the last of the judgment? I'll start with this. This is for you. You can always take a look at it. So now what happens? Now, if you remember, all these notices, the Supreme Court said that treat these notices as notices issued under 148B and follow the procedure prescribed in law, which is 148, the new provision. So one matter, and you all know, post that, there were directions given by the CBDT to all the officers that take up the proceedings in the physical form. That is, the JAO's jurisdictional assessing officers were to pass orders, to pick them up and pass orders till orders under 148AD were to be passed. So till the interim order of 148AD, the JAWs assumed jurisdiction in the physical form and started to seek questions, raise questions, seek responses, and they did so. Now, you all know, friends, that there is section 144B, which says that post a particular date, which is 2022, all such proceedings under 147, 148, 143(2) have to be undertaken in a faceless manner. And it is mandatory. Then there was a notification in the official gazette where the entire process of faceless was delineated. So somebody went up to the High Court, that is in this Karnakala Ravindra, and they said, Karnataka Kerala High Court, that listen, the process had to be followed as has been prescribed under section 148A post 2022. How come the department can direct against the notification, against the section stating that JAWs should undertake this? And the Honorable High Court considered this issue. They said, yes, very true. So every proceeding that took place under 148AB till the order under 148AD is to be quashed. Is void ab initio. And now, so what happens? All 92 assessments or orders under 148AD will come crumbling down. Some courts will say, yes, they'll agree with Kerala. Some may not also. But the judgment is very reasonable. So again, you go, 90,000 cases go up and would land up in the Supreme Court. Now let's presume the Supreme Court says, no, this is okay. The board has the power. And therefore, all right, we use our discretion once again. So we revise these notices. There is another set of litigation pending, which is, there's a recent judgment of the Bombay High Court in the case of Ashok Commercial. In the case of Delhi High Court, Brandix is already there, where they say every communication with the assessee has to be with a DIN. And all these processes that took place did not have a DIN. That is 148B to 148D. The Bombay High Court even says that when a satisfaction recorded has to be communicated to you, it has to be separately accompanied with a DIN. So if the Supreme Court is to reverse this, DIN will come up. So 90,000, if you are looking at only 90,000, has given right to litigation in respect of 270,000 cases, I would say. Simple mathematics. Are we, Anil Bhai, are we? What is this? Have we become a developed nation? We continue to be so poor. Per capita is 2,000. GDP is high only because of the numbers. Can we afford this wasteful litigation to go on in this country? And with no revenue coming in? What revenue will come in? All these assessments will get quashed. So this is what Abhisar has, what Ashish Agarwal has done. And now, this is what Abhisar is also going to do, which I'm going to discuss with you now. Let's come on to the first slide. So, now, Ashish Agarwal's effects are not over. They're going to linger for the next 10, 12 years, I would say. And so also in the case of Abhisar. Now, let's look at Abhisar. The first. And now, so I'll just explain broadly these are all, this is a reproduction from Abhisar in the first slide on exactly what they stated and what's my brief. Now, in the case of Abhisar Bildwell, the issue was that when a search takes place and an assessment consequent to the search has to be made under section 153A, then can the assessment post the search under 153A be made in the absence of incriminating material found during the course of search? Is the presence of incriminating material not only the presence, but its usage to make the assessment, it fructifying into an assessment, into an addition, is it mandatory? What if no incriminating material is found? Then would you be in a position to make an assessment under 153A post-search? Of course, department contended that if you read the section, plain reading of the section, it comes out that as soon as there is a search, there have to be 6 assessments, and all 6 assessments have to be made de novo. from A to Z. That was their contention. Then, of course, you all know, friends, I don't need to repeat. We had the first judgment of the Delhi High Court in the case of Kabul Chawla. Then a lot of other judgments followed where they said no. They said when a search takes place, there is something called a completed assessment on the date of search, or unabated assessment on the date of search, and abated assessment on the date of search. If on the date of search an assessment is completed, then you will tinker with it only when you have incriminating material found during the course of search. If you don't have any incriminating material in respect of that year, you will close the assessment and accept the returned income. This is what the judgments were at the High Court level. And of course, if on the date of search, there are assessments which are pending, let's say a case where you still have to file your return of income, or a case where you file your return of income, but the period for picking up for scrutiny under 143(2) has not expired, this is considered to be an assessment which is abated, meaning thereby which is still pending on the date of search. So in respect of assessments which are pending, fair enough, you have to do a de novo assessment as if no search has happened. But in respect of completed assessment, it will be confined to the material found in the course of search. Now, so Abhisar thankfully said yes, we follow Kabul Chawla and all the other judgments. We hold incriminating material is mandatory. Of course, I will show to you, they went a step further, which was they were not required to, but they did in that judgment, respectfully stating, not within their domain, but they did so. And most importantly, which is the subject of my discussion here today, are the 3 lines on this slide. I'll just read them out to you. So while they held, let me read para 4. They said, in case no incriminating material is unearthed during the search, the AO cannot assess or reassess, taking into consideration the other material in respect of completed assessments or unabated assessments. Meaning thereby, in respect of completed or unabated assessments, no addition can be made by the AO in the absence of any incriminating material found during the course of search under section 132 or requisition under section 132A of the Act. However, the completed or unabated assessment can be reopened by the AO in exercise of powers under section 147 or 148 of the Act, subject to fulfillment of conditions as envisaged or mentioned under section 147 or 148 of the Act, and those powers are saved. Now, these 3 lines will lead to litigation in terms of numbers. It could be lakhs. These 3 lines and the interpretation of these 3 lines, the CBDT circular to interpret, to give effect to these 3 lines, supposedly to give effect to these 3 lines, is going to bring in a huge mass of litigation. Now, let's move on to the next slide. So friends, what was the ratio decidendi? By the spellings of ratio decidendi are incorrect. What was the ratio decidendi of the judgment in the case of Abhisar? Briefly put, there were 3. A, completed, as I already said, unabated assessment cannot be assessed or reassessed without any incriminating material. Abated assessments on the date of search can be assessed de novo. Fair enough. 1 additional ratio decidendi. If incriminating material is found for any assessment year, in respect of completed or unabated or abated assessment, other material can also be used, meaning thereby that let us say if a search takes place and there is a document which says 1 lakh paid to Mr. Ajay Wadhwa in cash. So that's an incriminating material not recorded in the books of account. So you will make an addition of rupees 1 lakh, taking into account this incriminating material in the assessment under 153A. But the moment the incriminating material exists and you make an addition, then information that you have collected post the search or during the course of assessment will also be used to make an assessment. Therefore, so I hope you get my point. Now, if once the assessing officer enters on the basis of incriminating material, then he can use other material also, regardless of whether it was found during the course of search or not. Now, this is in addition to what Kabul Chawla said. Kabul Chawla and other judgments said, restrict it to incriminating evidence, no reconsideration of the same material, no reconsideration of the balance sheets already filed, no looking at anywhere else. Anyway, this judgment is an overreach in totality. This is one of the small overreach. Let's look at the other overreach. Now, quickly, what constitutes incriminating material? Friends, incriminating material, you all know, is something which is not recorded, which impinges on your stated return, what is given in the return of income, any material which indicates that your return is false in terms of the disclosure made by way of income. More income needs to be added, which you have not added, is incriminating material. That's how what it is. That's the interpretation. So many courts have interpreted in a different way. But the important is, see, that a statement recorded during the course of search is not incriminating material unless and until the statement is to buttress the incriminating material found. So therefore, let's say there is a search, and in the search, somebody is threatened, or somebody is compelled, or somebody is driven to a situation where he says, I have made billions of rupees, but there is no information, no incriminating evidence to support that. That statement alone, though recorded in the 132.4, will not constitute incriminating material. So a statement on a standalone basis will not be incriminating material unless it is backed by incriminating material per se. That's what is incriminating material. Let's move on to the next, madam. Okay. Now, the issue is, let's come on to that observation which I mentioned again. This is what I'm supposed to be talking about. Don't worry, Anil, I will not take more than 20 minutes. And although I'm now...
No, please go ahead. This is an extremely subject.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you very much. So I will read what the Supreme Court said once again. The Supreme Court, as far as they said, well, the ratio which I've already shown, no incriminating material, no assessment. But they also said that completed or unabated assessments can be reopened by the AO in exercise of powers under section 147, subject to the fulfillment of conditions as envisaged or mentioned under section 147. And those powers are saved. Now tell me, friends, on a bare appraisal of this, on a bare first-hand look at this, what comes out? What is new? They have stated the obvious, that if you have the powers, if you fulfill the conditions, you can reopen. If 153A is gone, you can reopen. Yes, and those powers are saved. Now, what they meant by saying this was that if the conditions mentioned under section 147/148 exist, that means during the course of search, let's say you find nothing, but post-search you find certain incriminating evidence which shows that the income has not been correctly returned, and you are not able to make addition in the 153A, use 148. If you have the time available to you, if you come within the confines of 148A, which says material is required, material you have the material to reopen the assessment. This is what they said. They stated the obvious. Now, a lot is being made out of this. Before that, I will like to focus on how a judgment of the Supreme Court is to be read. This is nothing new. I'm not saying anything new. It is Sun Engineering. And what did Sun Engineering said? They said, if a Supreme Court decides, there will be lots and lots of observations. Obviously, there has to be. It is human. You will refer to various sections. You will refer to how the judge thinks of those sections. They may not be the sections on which an interpretation is required, on which a ratio is to be given, or a decision is to be given. Those observations don't become a precedent. The words used in Sun Engineering are, precedent is an authority for what it decides, not what remotely or logically follows from it. So you don't, on a decision, you don't say this follows and this also becomes the ratio. Don't have words. Then say, decision on a question that has not been argued cannot be a precedent. Now, if you have certain, in the issue, SLP, is on a particular, or the appeal is on a particular issue, the grounds, and the Supreme Court has decided those grounds, those are the grounds which are the precedent, which are to be read, which is the law. Then they go further. They say judgment is to be read as a whole and in the context in which they were made in light of questions raised. So the judgment and questions are inseparable. The judgment takes the color of the question involved. That's what Sanjini said. And what is the question here before the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Abhisar? The question was, is an incriminating evidence requirement mandatory to make an assessment in respect of completed assessment under 153A? They said, yes, it is mandatory, this matter is over. But they went and observed that if you have the power under 148, reopen. Now, is that the question? Is that the ratio? Is that the issue? No, obviously not. But then there is one section, 150, which says that if, in order to render justice, to decide the matter, a direction is issued, which is necessary, or a finding is given, then that direction has to be implemented. If any, and that direction can be given by any appellate authority, a state appeal can give a direction, ITAT or the High Court can give a direction. That's what is the direction. So the CBDT has read these 3 lines as directions of the Supreme Court and said, based on this, assessing officers, reopen all cases where you did not find any incriminating evidence, but you did get some evidence, and subject them to under 148A of the Act. And that's what I'm going to be explaining now further. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So the CBDT gave instruction number 1, 2023. And imagine, friends, an instruction comes in the month of August 2023, the first instruction, as if this is the most important thing in the world. And no further instructions have been, no instructions in the earlier period on so many issues that have been decided. That's not what the CBDT is supposed to do. They're only supposed to raise issues and increase and proliferate litigation and make a section which is not add words to what the Honorable Supreme Court decides, blow it up and allow litigation to proliferate. Now, what do the CBDT says? Now look at how comprehensive this direction is. Anything which is to be done negative is always very comprehensive. So they say, officers, pick up all the cases which were the lead cases before the Supreme Court in the case of Abhisar and tagged cases, and find out if you had information and reopen them under 148 in view of section 150 of the Act. Apply 150. Treat them as directions of the Supreme Court. Those 3 lines have to be treated as directions for everyone to reopen these cases. Also, wherever an appeal is pending, before the CAT appeal or the ITAT or the High Court or the Supreme Court, please bring this judgment to their notice. Tell them directions have been given. You also give directions. Then, wherever the authorities, the quasi-judicial authorities have not followed Abhisar, because Abhisar was not there then, show them, file miscellaneous applications, rectification applications. Here is a draft of a miscellaneous application. File it before them, tell them, recall the case in view of Abhisar and put in those directions under section 150 as well. Yes, where they have attained finality, where no appeal is preferred, then please, then spare the assessing. Thank you for the kindness. Let's move on. Now then, they also say what the process is to be. They even list down the process to be followed by the AO. So they say that, thankfully, if you read the first, they say reopen, subject to fulfillment of conditions in those sections. The time limit for issuance of notice would be in accordance with provision of section 150 of the Act. So 150 clause 2 prescribes the time limit within which you in respect of the number of years which you can reopen. I will come to that also later. Then they said apply the monetary limits, because under 147, 148, there are certain monetary limits under the new provisions where if you have the income over a particular amount, only those can be reopened subject to certain conditions. Then wherever a sanction is required by a higher authority, by a higher administrative authority, section 151 to be used. And then section 150 has to be used. Again, they say this instruction, this observation of the High Court, of the Supreme Court, is a direction. Now, friends, so we have this judgment and of Abhisar and those observations. I am now going to show you that the CBDT, the department, tried their level best post Abhisar to have the Supreme Court to give direction under 150, to treat these observations as direction under section 150 of the Act. They filed applications before the High Court, miscellaneous applications before the Supreme Court, saying that your observations which you have given, please write, please state, please clarify that these are directions under 150 of the Act and no time limit would apply. They said so. The Supreme Court declined. And when nothing happened, they said, all right, let us treat these observations of the Supreme Court suo motu, as if adding words to what Supreme Court has said as directions. If the Supreme Court doesn't say they are directions, let us say it. Because we are also the Supreme Court. What is the big deal? Now, let's see. Now I'm going to show you next paragraph, the department's efforts to get directions from the Supreme Court under section 150 of the Act. These efforts were all made after Abhisar came. So I'm only reproducing those. This is going to help you, friends, when you prepare your appeals or you decide to go to the High Court. Now, this will be required for you to show that the Supreme Court never meant those observations to be directions. The department wanted them to be considered as directions in section 150, and they filed all these miscellaneous applications which were rejected. Left with no choice, they said, let's treat them as directions under 150 of the Act. Now, there was an application after the judgment of the Supreme Court dated 26/4/2023 called MA number 680 of 2023. And one of the requests was, just see the request, in the absence of incriminating material found in the course of search, in respect of such income which was found to have escaped assessment other than through incriminating material, the assessing officer would be entitled to reassess such income in terms of section 147, 148, read with 150. This is what they wanted the Honorable Supreme Court to say. Then, this was followed by a written note by the department where they said, revenue also makes it clear, the second part, that before this court, that it shall proceed to assess only such incomes where the AO has already gathered material to any other sources which has already been assessed either under this or this, and the proceeding stand state. Meaning thereby that we assure you, sir, if you give these directions, if you treat your observations as directions to reopen assessment under 148, we will only restrict the additions to the material found post-search. We will not do any wishy-washy inquiry. Another written note. Okay, let's move on. So what does the Supreme Court says? They say the prayer sought, this is what they say in MA number 680, the relevant portion of the Honorable Supreme Court. The prayer sought can be looked into in the form of review, which requires detailed consideration at length looking into the importance of the matter. Therefore, the present application in form of clarification is not entertained, and we relegate the revenue to file an appropriate review application for relief. So they expressly say, listen, you wanting us to convert our observations into directions? Sorry, we are not. File a review. This is a review. This is a reconsideration of our order. This is not what we meant. When do you file a review? You file a review when you realize that there are certain things which are per incuriam, law has not been taken into consideration, so you review the order. So they said, no, this is not a review. These are our observations, they remain so. And in the subsequent judgment again, in the case of UK Paints, the Honorable Supreme Court again says the same thing. The department made a prayer that please, again, give directions. And the Supreme Court said, however, the last para, so far as the prayer made on behalf of the revenue to permit them to initiate the reassessment proceeding is concerned, it is observed that it will be open for the revenue to initiate reassessment proceeding in accordance with law and is permissible under law. These are not directions. This is stating the obvious, that you have this section, use it if you want to. What are directions? This is what I'll come to later. What are findings? This is all settled. This is not a new matter. So Supreme Court consistently says that what we have stated are not directions. Please don't take them as directions. But the CBT says, no, since they are not intervening, let's take them as directions and let's see what will happen. Doesn't matter. क्या फर्क पड़ता है? बस ऐसी लड़ रहे हैं, लड़ते रहेंगे. 200 केस उनके चल रहे हैं, 100 और चल जाएंगे. How does it make a difference? Now let's come on to what are directions. This has been decided by Rajendranath and others. And so many other Supreme Court judgments post that and High Court judgments. But Rajendranath was the first of the Supreme Court judgment, therefore I brought it out. Now, they say, firstly, they define what a finding is. So the first two may be left out because this is not a finding, it's a direction. So as far as directions are concerned, it starts with the third para, which says direction must be necessary for the disposal of the case before any authority. Now tell me, friends, if an observation under 148 was not given, you don't think the Supreme Court could have decided the matter? So unless and until a direction is important to dispose of the appeal in question. The appeal in question was whether incriminating material is required to make an assessment under 153 or A or not. The Supreme Court said no, that's it, period. Nothing else was required to be stated to dispose this issue. Therefore, this observation cannot be a direction because this was not necessary for disposal of the appeal before the High Court. Then, the next point. Direction must be a direction which the authority or court is empowered to give while deciding the case before it. Now tell me, when they say court also includes the Supreme Court. Was the Supreme Court empowered to give this direction? They could only give this direction if it was necessary to dispose of the appeal. This was not necessary. So this was also not within the power of the Supreme Court to be given as a direction. Therefore, they said, we are not giving it as a direction. We are only giving it as an observation. We are only stating the obvious. Therefore, the Supreme Court didn't even have the power to do this. Everybody has to work under the dictates of law. Nobody is beyond the law. Even Supreme Court is dictated by what is given in the Act. And the Act says only necessary for disposal. This was not necessary. This was stating the obvious. Therefore, didn't have the power. Most importantly, what's a direction? Direction is something which is circumcised, which does not give any discretion in the hands of the assessing officer. You direct him to do this. He has no option but to only do that, and only in that manner. He doesn't have any discretion left, no option left. This is what it says. A direction by a statutory authority is in the nature of an order requiring positive compliance. When it's left to the option and discretion of the income tax officer whether or not to take action, it cannot in our observation be described as a direction. Now, the observation is, if you have the power, invoke 148. Now, is it a direction? This gives the discretion in the hands of the assessing officer to take a look at the entire file and see whether there is material which is sufficient to reopen the assessment under 148A of the Act. Whether the conditions prescribed under 148A are fulfilled or not. He cannot reopen every assessment when 153A has been passed. So wherever you give him the discretion, the choice, how is it a direction? Therefore, this order, the CBDT order, is illegal raised to the power of infinity. It could be more illegal than this. This is my view, because it does not fit into the scope of the direction. One is not empowered to give a direction of this nature, and it's an observation stating the obvious. And then, of course, I've already stated direction. They tried to get a direction, they couldn't get it, but then they said, let us treat with a judge. Now, friends, before I go on to the next, just go back to the earlier slide. Now, another distressing, Anil, a very distressing development has taken place. I should have prepared a slide for that, but I'll give you the decision. Now, there was a case in Bombay, in the case of, in Naresh Manikchand Jain, Bombay Tribunal. And this one is dated 29/8/2023. This is a case which it is not represented by the SSE. SSE didn't come, so it's an ex parte order, the SSE. And it was an appeal by the SSE. SSE did not come, so it's an ex parte order. I'm repeating this. And here, you will be shocked. The issue was that there's a gentleman called Manikchand Jain, who's an accommodation entry provider. He gives capital gains, he gives long-term, whatever you want, he tailor-makes and he does it. And he has given this to almost 30,000 plus beneficiaries. People have benefited by this. So he does not come. So obviously, you'll have to decide the matter on merits. And you would say, well, we hold him to be an entry operator. We go with the observations of the CIT appeal and we tax him on the commission or whatever is the income and confirm it. That's it. That's what the ITAT should have done. And that's what is the scope of the ITAT. They can't go beyond the grounds. The word uses thereon. Thereon means you can pass any order, but thereon means confined to the grounds of appeal. You can't go beyond the grounds. And these were the grounds. But what does the ITAT do? What does it do? They don't stop there. So now they say, while we uphold the order of the CIT appeal, 10 pages, we give the following directions. They say we direct the assessing officer to complete what we have now stated within 90 days of the receipt of this order. They say, share information of this racket with the money laundering authorities. Give it to them. All 30,000 names have to be given to those authorities. Then, Abhisar applies. Treat these as directions under section 150. And CBDT circular is valid, so to say. Now imagine in Abhisar, if you have to take them as directions, you would take them as directions in respect of those cases which are in appeal. Here, these 3,000, 35, 36,000 are not in appeal. Beneficiary, they're sitting, they're sleeping. So they say, now apply those as directions. My ITAT gives, I give directions. 36,000 people also to be picked up. And their matters to be sent to the Securities Exchange Board, SEBI, stock exchanges, PMLA, price rigging, MCA, registrar of companies. All this you do, 2 pages on this in respect of those 36. Man being assessed is just one. Appeal is for that. ITAT says, assumes all these powers and gives all these directions to everybody. And within 90 days, it has to be complied. And on an ex parte order. Now tell me, friends, tell me, what are we becoming? Is an ITAT or a quasi-judicial authority not supposed to work within the confines provided in law? They are all social activists. So when you make an order, you make it exemplary to the extent that every wrong that you can possibly think of, you preempt. You pass an ex parte order. Maybe Manikchand is not an NT operator. He's held to be genuine, and all these are mere allegations. But firstly, you make an ex parte order, and then you make an ex parte, whether you direct the department to circulate all this before every authority and start proceedings in 36,000 people without giving them an opportunity. Is that the scope of the ITAT? Is this not a case of an overreach by miles? If every authority assumes the role of a vigilante. It doesn't go beyond the act. What's going to happen? Chaos. And friends, this CBDT circular has just come in. It is to be tested. It's not to be tested like this. In one word, you say the CBDT circular is okay. Abhishar has given a direction in an ex parte order. The next day, and you try to by this you would somehow foreclose so much of so much of interpretation that would come into this. That's the point of concern. That's the point of wonder. Now, friends, last slide, 11. Now, given that what has happened, the CBDT circular is there. In my view, of course, whenever an assessment is reopened, you can challenge the CBDT circular. CBDT circular, if it is illegal, does not have to be followed. If it is contrary to law, it doesn't have to be followed. So you have to bring in all these issues. If you want to follow the usual route of appeal, raise it before the AO, then before the appellate authority. But in my view, this is a jurisdictional issue. This goes to the root of the matter because 148A cannot be issued because they are being issued on the basis of directions which are not directions. So therefore, it becomes fundamental, it becomes jurisdictional. Therefore, test water before the High Court. And it ought to go to the High Court. But I think the cause of action will arise the moment you get a notice, you respond, and you also receive a response of the AO on this. He doesn't drop, he follows the notice, and that's when the cause of action in form of it, or otherwise pursue the appeal. Now here, one more thing is, the department will now try to count the number of years when they can go back from the date of assessment. Right? They will say on the date of assessment, if we could reopen 6 years, we'll go to that on the date of passing the order. But that's not so. 150 says the period will begin from the date of the order appealed against. Now let's say you go before the CIT appeal and CIT appeal says, no, these are incriminating material. These are not, and therefore 153A is valid. And the department goes and appeal before the ITAT. The ITAT says, yes, they are not incriminating material, 153A is gone. Then the terminal dates, the 6-year period will be from the date of the order of the CIT appeal, not the order of the AO. So therefore, the goalposts will keep shifting as and when the higher. So it's the order which is appealed against is the order from where the number of years you can go back to reopen the assessment has to be counted. That's all what I want to say. And this has also been held by the Delhi High Court in the case of Intech Corporation. You may all take a look at it. So thank you very much, friends, for a very. It has to be patient because it's a one-way traffic, and but I hope I've been able to make some sense. And I'm again thankful to Anil for giving me this opportunity to interact with you. And there's a lot of learning, once you go in, you learn so many things yourself. And grateful again, Anil. Handing over the mic to you.
Thank you, Ajay. Extremely interesting. You have presented a vexed issue. And I think there are a very large number of people who are going to be affected by it, large number of matters. Let's see how justice finds a way to deal effectively with this, if possible, at an early date. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you.
My next speaker is, and last speaker of the day, is Gaurav Jain, Senior Partner, Lexstone Law Chambers. Gaurav will, in very brief, give just a touch and feel on certain related laws and their interplay with income tax. The laws here being Black Money Act, PMLA or money laundering, and Benami Property Act. Gaurav too is a CA cum lawyer. He's now practicing as a lawyer. He has had more than 2 decades of experience in tax, litigation, and advisory He argues in Supreme Court, High Court, tribunals, PMLA, and other forums and authorities. He's a senior partner in an NCR law firm, and he has been specializing in matters relating to white-collar crimes like SFIO, PMLA, FEMA. He is associated with some renowned CA firms, law firms, for whom he appears in litigation and also supports advisory matters. He is previously a partner of the very well-known Vash Associates in the field of direct taxation. Gaurav has also authored a book on black money law published by Taxman. Friends, Gaurav Jain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chopra, for a very kind words of introduction, and PhD again for welcoming me to share my thoughts on this new topic. I think I should first thank Mr. Chopra to be so thoughtful of thinking about this topic of interplay of income tax with other economic offense laws like PMLA, Benami, Black Money Act, especially in cases of search. Search, friends, as we heard my other experienced speakers, invades the privacy of a person, and every individual who is subjected to search is exposed to a lot of transactions which are not normally disclosed to the department. So, so when a search takes place, an assessee, according to us, needs to be aware of other related laws also, like PMLA, Benami, Black Money, because it has two advantages. It results in two advantages. One, the assessee may feel that yes, whatever transactions he has done are tax compliant, while he may feel that they are tax compliant, but when the search unfolds, he may be non-compliant on other laws. So therefore, it becomes important to be aware of those other laws. That's one. Secondly, if he is aware, at times it is practically witnessed that at the time of search, the department not only seeks to say that no, so it's not only a case of tax evasion, but you have entered into transactions which have resulted in evasion of other laws which may not be true. So for that reason also, in order to guard yourself from such harassment at the time of search, one should be aware of the nitty-gritties of the other laws. So with that background, I think I will be just briefly, as Mr. Chopra has said, we'll be touching briefly upon the other laws, what those other laws talk about, and what is their interplay with income tax. These are topics, media topics, where a lot of discussion can happen. But I think given the topic of the day and time availability, we will not deep dive into those laws, but try to briefly touch upon so that one is aware of the exposure one can have in other laws. So with that background, friends, I'll move forward. First, friends, as we all know, income tax is a civil law in as much as it imposes tax on income, and payment of tax is a civil liability. Non-payment thereof can, yes, subject you to penalty and prosecution only if it's a willful default. As opposed to income tax, friends, insofar as PMLA and Benami law are concerned, they are criminal laws like IPC, in the sense that if a person is found to have committed offense of money laundering, which is covered under PMLA, or entering into a Benami transaction covered by Benami law, then they are considered as criminal offenses that as soon as the person is found to have committed the offense, he is subject to prosecution and attachment of the subject matter of property, as opposed to income tax, where you are only subject to income tax and then thereafter penalties thereon and prosecution only if it's a willful default. Akin to income tax, friends, black money law, which is covered by Black Money Act, is also an offshoot of Income Tax Act only, which seeks to tax foreign undisclosed income and foreign undisclosed assets of residents in India. So the parliament has sought to carve out a specific law to deal with menace of foreign undisclosed income and assets parked by residents of India outside India. So it is only applicable to residents of India. And apart from, in addition to taxation of income, the scope of Black Money Act is widened and expanded to foreign assets also. Friends, Income Tax Act, as we all are aware, only seeks to tax income. If asset is found, asset is also taxed only if that asset is acquired out of undisclosed sources of income. As opposed to income tax, while black money is an offshoot of Income Tax Act, but it also enhances its scope by seeking to tax undisclosed foreign assets of a resident in India. So that's a little variation. And why? Friends, we all are aware that prior to the recast of Section 148 provisions, with the new provisions of 148A and reduced time limits of 3 years and 10 years under Section 149, the taxation of foreign income of a resident in India was subject to a higher time limit of 16 years. That has been done away with the recast of 148 provisions. Now the foreign income continues, if at all it is to be taxed under the Income Tax Act, it is subject to the normal time limits of 3 years and 10 years, which is applicable to other income also. As opposed to this, there is no bar of limitation under the Black Money Act. So possibly the intent of the legislature is to cover the seizure or investigation of foreign income and foreign assets of resident in India in Black Money Act, where there is no bar of limitation, and restrict the scope of Income Tax Act to income of residents, domestic income of residents only. So this is what is somewhat distinction between income tax and black money law. But yes, broadly, Black Money Act is an offshoot of income tax. It continues to remain a taxing statute. It imposes tax on the foreign income and foreign asset of a resident in India at the rate of 30%, although at the fair market value of the asset, at an enhanced rate of penalties are imposed. And yes, prosecutions are also there, which are not compoundable, unlike the Income Tax Act. So this is the brief overview of Black Money Act and how it is partly different than the Income Tax Act. Now, I'll touch upon what is PMLA and Benami. But first, we're now coming to interplay. I would like to highlight upon the first interplay between all these acts on the administration side. Friends, like Income Tax Act, Black Money Act is also administered by Income Tax Department only. By the investigation wing can do the investigation or do the assessment. Assessing officer can do the assessment. The appeals are before the CIT appeal, and further appeal from the CIT appeal is to Income Tax Appellate Tribunal only. So under the Black Money law, the entire administration and appellate forum is akin to Income Tax Act only. Similar to Income Tax Act, even under Benami law, the investigation part rests with the income tax authorities only. They have created a special wings within income tax authorities, which act either as investigation officers, approving authority, or adjudicating authority to do investigation and continue attachment proceedings under the Black Money law. So that's the interplay, first interplay between Benami law and the income tax law, where the administration of attachment proceedings rests with Income Tax Department only. But when it crosses the stage of adjudicating authority and it goes to the appellate forum, there the disconnect is. Now the appellate forum for the Benami is the Benami tribunal, which falls within the PMLA tribunal only. So only the administration part is with the Income Tax Authority, the appellate goes to the PMLA tribunal. Now PMLA and Benami, the PMLA tribunal is common, the appellate tribunal is common, but the lower investigation rests with Enforcement Director ED. So the IO in case of PMLA is the Enforcement Director, and then there is an adjudicating authority, which is again a different forum, a separate wing other than the Enforcement Director, and appeal there against goes to PMLA tribunal, which is common to both Benami and the PMLA tribunal. So this is how, friends, there is an interplay insofar as administration of all these laws is concerned, where to some extent commonality of administration between income tax, black money, and Benami is with Income Tax Department. But when it comes to appellate, the Benami and PMLA tribunal is common for Benami and PMLA law. Moving ahead, friends, what is an interplay of PMLA and Income Tax Act as well as BMA? Friends, PMLA is Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And when we comes to charge of offense under section 3, it refers to offense of money laundering. Money laundering, when we understand in common parlance, means laundering of money, that is converting black money into white money, that is launder of money. But friends, the definition of money laundering under the PMLA is not understood in this common meaning. The meaning of money laundering under the PMLA is pegged to proceeds of crime. So if the person has received proceeds from a criminal activity, which is a scheduled offense, which is an offense contained in the Schedule 2 PMLA, only that proceed is considered as a proceeds of crime or an offense of money laundering. And what are scheduled offenses? There's a long list of scheduled offenses attached to the PMLA, which would be like any offense under the IPC, insider trading under the SEBI law, smuggling act, and even the black money offense is a scheduled offense under the PMLA. But Income Tax Act is not a scheduled offense under the PMLA. So in case there is a charge of doing an accommodation entry under Income Tax Act, or making a bogus purchase to convert a black money into white money under an income tax, that automatically does not become an offense of money laundering under the PMLA. And the issue is no longer res integra. It has been settled by a speaking judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Vijay Madan Lal, that an offense under Income Tax Act not being a scheduled offense under PMLA, that automatically does not become an offense of money laundering under PMLA. So therefore, friends, just because you are charged with an offense of money laundering under Income Tax Act, that does not become an offense under PMLA, because that offense is not a scheduled offense under PMLA. But that is not an escape, friends. The search always unfolds many things. So it may not be an immediate offense scheduled under the PMLA, but the things can unfold during the search, which may result in offenses under the other law, and I'll explain it with examples. For instance, you have taken an accommodation entry, and the source of that accommodation entry is traced to money of corruption, or proceeds from an insider trading, or misappropriation of funds out of a bank loan. All these three are scheduled offenses under PMLA. Misappropriation of bank is like a fraud. Insider trading is a scheduled offense under SEBI and scheduled offense under PMLA. Corruption Act is again a scheduled offense under the PMLA, and if the corruption money is sourced to an accommodation entry into your books, then it by itself, it may not be a scheduled offense under income tax. But since those proceeds are from scheduled offenses, you may be trapped under the nuances of PMLA. So that's how, friends, there could be an interplay of income tax with PMLA, and these things can unfold during the course of search. Similarly, friends, Black Money Act, unlike Income Tax Act, which is not a scheduled offense under PMLA as explained, Black Money Act has been made a scheduled offense. An offense, a transaction referred to in section 51 of the Black Money Act, and 51 is a prosecution provision, which says that if you have willfully evaded tax under the black money law, it would be considered as a scheduled offense for the purposes of PMLA. So in case of a BMA, if a person is found to have committed offense under the Black Money Act, holding of foreign assets, holding of foreign income, that by itself will become a scheduled offense under PMLA, and PMLA authorities can start, can exercise their own rights of attachment or maybe prosecution if a person is found to be facilitating a person involved in holding or facilitating a transaction of holding undisclosed income outside India. So in that sense, friends, there is a minor difference between Income Tax Act and Black Money Act when it comes to PMLA, and these kind of transactions can be subjected to or exposed under the PMLA. Now, friends, I'll come to, in brief, interplay with the Benami Act. Friends, what is Benami? Benami law seeks to cover prohibition of Benami transactions. And Benami transactions, as the name suggests, means where a person owns the asset, but he's like a Benamidar. He has not contributed to the acquisition of that asset, and he owns only on behalf of someone else who has contributed to the acquisition of the asset. So while the asset is owned in name of one person, but the contributor to the acquisition of asset is other person, and that contributor is only the beneficiary of that asset. In that sense, that holder becomes the Benamidar and the transaction becomes a Benami. And further, if the transaction is held in a fictitious name, there is nobody comes up for the ownership of that asset and continues to remain vested in a fictitious name, even that kind of a transaction become a Benami transaction, which is prohibited under the Benami law. And the consequences of entering into a Benami transaction, as I explained earlier, is prosecution and attachment of that property. Friends, now this transaction also has interplay with income tax. I'll explain it with a few illustrations which I have witnessed in my limited experience of handling Benami matters. Suppose there is a shell company which is owned by a person of no means, and there were inflow of funds in that shell company, and that shell company further gave accommodation entry to a genuine operating company. Now, if an income tax search happens or an income tax investigation happens on that operating company, he would say that source of that accommodation entry is vested to that shell company and it had requisite funds. And therefore, I have explained sources. I cannot be subjected to a charge of unexplained income under Section 68 of the Income Tax Act. Now, with this, friends, I may escape taxation under the Income Tax Act under Section 68 thereof. But that shell company, which is held by person of no means, they are not able to explain the sources of funds arising in that shell company. That shell company can be subjected to a Benami law, Benami transaction. And when those funds are invested in that operating company, while I may escape taxation under Section 68, but since the funds have been invested in the operating company, those funds can be attached under the Benami law. So that's how, friends, there can be one example of interplay between Benami law and the Income Tax Act, that while on one hand I can save myself from taxation under the Income Tax Act, but I can be caught on the other hand by attachment of those funds under the Benami law. Similar, friends, is cases of demonetization. I'm practically handling a case where in course of search, if a person is found to have facilitated conversion of demonetization money, that money was first brought in like a sale in the books of account, and then the checks were issued to the actual beneficiary. And if some trace of that transaction is found, there may not be any escapement of tax because this person has actually not earned any undisclosed income. He has just infused funds of some other person and then given back to the actual beneficiary. But this transaction may not have income tax implication, but could be considered as facilitating a Benami transaction where the contributor is other person and beneficiary is also the other person, and this person has only facilitated in a Benami transaction. And in a Benami transaction, even the facilitator is subject to offense of Benami transaction. So in these kind of situations, friends, while there is no implication under the Income Tax Act, but there could be a exposure on the Benami side. So friends, this was a little brief overview of what these laws are concerned, and just to give an exposure as to while I may be saved on income tax, but there could be exposure on the other laws, or I can protect at the time of investigation of handling that, no, my transaction, for instance, an accommodation entry case, it is not subject to any PMLA or a Benami law, and it's a pure income tax issue. So we can keep these things in mind while handling our income tax cases, more particularly in cases of search, investigation, and assessments. Thank you for giving me this time and sharing my thoughts on this. Over to you, Anil, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Gaurav. Very interesting and superbly presented. Thank you very much. It's very clear and very succinct And I think some of us are listening and learning to some extent, perhaps for the first time, as to the essence and of these provisions and the interplay with Income Tax Act. And today,
my pleasure.
when you are doing search and seizure, these provisions often are relevant and must be kept in view. Foreign assets or income, money laundering, benami. These three commonly often come into play, and a good understanding of them is certainly useful. Thank you very much. Friends, with these words, I have the privilege of thanking you very much, most and foremost, all the participants for being with us. The webinar is for you, and we are delighted that you are here with us. Thank you very much indeed. I also thank all my partners, online and media partners, knowledge partners. Thank you very much indeed. I sincerely appreciate, PhD sincerely appreciates your joining us in these webinars. Thank you. And the speakers, once more, thank you. I wish I could give you a standing acclamation. So you take it that it is deemed given, and thank you very much for a superb day's work and a superb afternoon's work, particularly. Each and every one of you have been brilliant, and I am indeed very grateful to you. Thank you so much indeed.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you once again. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.